"Noah, you troublemaker!" A childish voice rang out from below, sharp and playful. From a second-story window, a boy with neatly combed black hair closed his book and looked down. Despite being only 10 years old, Noah radiated a composed maturity far beyond his years. He was the natural leader of the Koshi Youth Organization, a figure both respected and feared. Setting his book aside, he leapt down from the window with practiced ease. His demeanor, meticulous and commanding, was uncharacteristic for a child his age. "What is it? Who's causing trouble in my town?" Noah asked, squinting into the rain-damp streets of Riestromia. This place was no longer the unnamed village of a decade ago. 8 years ago, the miraculous act of the Great Negary had driven out the Kent tribe. Since then, the village had been reborn, now known as Riestromia, the place watched by greatness. Whether that greatness meant gods, devils, or ghosts, it mattered little to the people who had witnessed power beyond comprehension. After another failed invasion by the Kent people, Riestromia flourished. Refugees and wanderers of Koshi descent came from far and wide to settle under Negary's shadow. To them, whether Negary was divine or monstrous didn't matter. His presence offered protection. Within just 10 years, Riestromia transformed into the largest trade hub in the region. Though the Royas and Intercam kingdoms forbade trade, greed spoke louder than law. Smugglers, mercenaries, fugitives, spies, and all manner of criminals made Riestromia their playground. The lawless became lawful in this new world of opportunity. At the center of this thriving chaos stood the Koshi people, worshippers of Negary. They established the Crow Men, a local militia that kept a strange, brutal kind of order. Alongside them rose another group, the Koshi Youth Organization, a band of children who controlled the city's underbelly. Once dismissed as a gang of playing children, they quickly absorbed most of the city's pickpockets, establishing themselves as underground enforcers. These post-Negary children were unnaturally sharp in mind and body. Some even rivaled adults in strength and cunning. As Noah walked the streets, more youths joined him, a silent procession of authority. Merchants and smugglers gave the group a wide berth. Everyone knew better than to cross the Koshi youth. A braided-haired girl caught up beside him. A lone wolf mercenary just arrived today. Lars tried to rob him, but now he's holed up in our base. Says he's looking for someone. Noah raised an eyebrow. Looking for trouble or compensation? He wasn't surprised. Sooner or later, every pickpocket slipped up. Most issues were resolved with an apology and a return coin purse. If the victim was strong or had backing, things stayed civil. If they didn't, well, the crows of Riestromia always welcomed more to feed on. But this case was different. "He's holding some of our people," the girl added with a frown. "Said he'll only release them if we help him. He's looking for the crazy girl's house." Noah stopped cold. The crazy girl she referred to as Nala, one of the few Koshi children who had never submitted to Noah's leadership. Even if she had, Noah would have rejected her. After all, she was the daughter of a sinner. "Let's go meet our guest," he said, turning toward the youth hideout. High above Riestromia, perched in a massive tree hidden within the city's depths, Wang Yuan opened his eyes. Thousands of crows stirred with him, their wings a black wave against the sky. "So someone's looking for Nala and Isabella," he murmured. Wang Yuan was no ordinary observer. To him, Noah wasn't just a child. He was a vessel, a righteous, through whom Wang Yuan could see and act. Every piece of information Noah knew. So did he. A mercenary, not royal blood, curious. He wasn't overly concerned. His current experiments on Nala were reaching a pivotal moment. He couldn't allow anyone, especially not an outsider, to interfere. Over the years, Isabella had tried to leave Riestromia more than once. Wang Yuan had stopped her each time. Noah will handle it, Wang Yuan thought, his eyes closing again as the murder of crows took flight. Several young men sat on the cold floor, bruised and subdued. One of them nursed a swollen face, clearly the target of a recent beating. At the center of the room sat a middle-aged man, his posture relaxed yet exuding a quiet intensity. He wore a leather jacket made from the hide of some unknown beast, and various tokens, small mementos of battles past, hung from his belt and neck. A long scar crossed his face, but instead of making him look vicious, it lent him a rugged air of experience. With a calm smile, he casually juggled a pebble in one hand, his eyes fixed on the injured youths before him. That was the scene Noah walked into. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the unfamiliar man. A flicker of recognition passed through his gaze. "If I'm not mistaken, this is our first meeting, Mr. Chrismodo," Noah said evenly. "Never thought I'd find you in Reastromia." The middle-aged man stopped juggling and raised an eyebrow. His interest piqued. "You know who I am?" He studied Noah more carefully now. Though he looked young, barely 10, there was a gravity in his presence that made the age seem like a mask. "You can call me Noah," the boy said as he pulled a chair across from Chris and sat down. His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. "I should really tell my subordinates more of your old stories." Sakri's writing was compelling. "I especially liked the Snow Mountain Escort chapter." Chris chuckled, the expression on his face softening. "Ah, that one brings back memories." Chris Modo, known across the continent as a legendary adventurer, the so-called miraculous immortal. His exploits had been immortalized in stories written by his old friend Sakri. For many young men, Chris was the embodiment of freedom and courage. He had slain wyverns to save entire villages, dismantled cults that defiled corpses for rituals, even brokered peace in the civil war of the Licca Kingdom. The trinkets he wore weren't for show. They were trophies: a wyvern's fong, a medallion from the Mystical Research Society, and a ring symbolizing eternal friendship with Licca's royal family, granting him the right to summon their army in times of crisis. The scar on his face? A souvenir from the Snow Mountain Escort, a mission where he risked his life to guide a noble heir through a deadly mountain range. Despite the wound, he delivered the heir home safely. "So," Noah said, voice tinged with genuine curiosity, "what brings a living legend like you to our little town?" Chris leaned back, fingers steepled. "I accepted a request to locate a woman. According to what I've gathered, she came to Reastromia over 10 years ago and never left." "Would you mind being a bit more specific?" Noah asked, his interest sharpening. "I can only share the basics, I'm afraid," Chris replied, eyes scanning the room for reactions. "Her name is Isabella. She's about 29 and a follower of the Church of Divine Grace." A faint twitch of emotion crossed the faces of Noah's companions. Chris noticed. "You know where she is," he said, voice lowering. "Tell me, and I'll pay you." Noah's face remained composed, unreadable, but his followers had already betrayed themselves in the presence of a seasoned veteran. 10 years ago, Noah began, Isabella entered Rhea, back when this was just a nameless Koshi village. If you ask the older residents, they'll confirm it. "So why the act?" Noah pressed. "A man like you doesn't get pickpocketed by someone like Lars." Chris grinned. "You're sharp." "Yes, I staged the whole thing. I needed to find someone fast and without attracting attention. You run the underworld here. I needed your help." He tossed the pebble aside and leaned forward, serious now. "I know where she is. I know she has a daughter, Nala. But I'm being watched. If I move too openly, I'll risk blowing the entire operation. I need your help arranging a secret meeting with her. She's needed elsewhere. And you trust us with this?" Noah asked, eyes narrowing. Chris shrugged. "Call it faith in people." He placed a pouch of coins on the table. "A deposit. Arrange it discreetly. Don't let the whole town find out." With that, he turned and walked out of the hideout. Noah watched him go in silence. There was truth in Chris' words, but also deceit. A man like Chris wouldn't rely on street gangs unless his hands were truly tied. His talk of trust? Pure fabrication. "Handle it like any other job," Noah ordered. Elsewhere in Reastromia, in a shadow beyond sight, Wang Yuan hovered silently before a woman. Isabella couldn't see him. None of them could. But Wang Yuan could see everything, and he understood the implications of Chris Modo's arrival. Isabella belonged to the Tagula family, a branch of Intercam's royal bloodline, said to carry the dragon's blood. Years ago, during a violent purge led by King Seth I, Most of the Tagula were executed as potential threats to the throne. Isabella, the eldest daughter, fled to this remote village and fell in love with a man named Jacob. Today, the Intercam kingdom was a fractured shadow of its former self. War with the Roya's kingdom loomed, and King Seth had few loyalists remaining. The problem? He had killed nearly everyone else with royal blood. In that vacuum, Isabella, long thought lost, was one of the last legitimate heirs to the throne. But that raised a troubling question. She's not the only one with royal blood, Wang Yuan thought. So why send Chris Moto? Something didn't add up. Isabella's place in the succession line wasn't prominent enough to justify this level of attention. There's more to this than I know, Wang Yuan muttered. His gaze shifted to the little girl who had just returned. Nala? Yes, this would need careful handling. And perhaps, if he played things right, it could be turned to his advantage.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
This was a little girl about 10 years of age. She had a beautiful head of flowing blonde hair, if only a bit messy. The clothes she was wearing were full of patches. Her face was dirted with black and gray ash that made her look like she was pretending to be a boy. If one carefully looked at her face, one would find that she looked inhumanly pretty. Having inherited her parents' best points, she was born with a natural aura that caused others to trust her. This little girl that looked like she was pretending to be a boy was Isabella and Jacob's daughter, Nala Dakmi. Chris stood from afar, observing the pair of mother and daughter. He was wearing a hat attached to a piece of cloth that wrapped around his face, concealing his scar. At the same time, he was also wearing a thick robe that concealed the various tokens he always carried around. After a few moments of observation, Chris suddenly scowled, let go of his scarf, and began to breathe rhythmically. His body harmonized with his surroundings, almost as if he was melting into thin air before exhaling a long breath, as if to expel something from his body. Negary, Chris once again covered his face and mouth with his scarf, doing everything he could to avoid direct contact with the air around himself, silently thinking to himself, I need to inform Augustine as soon as possible. I can't believe this evil spirit has already grown to this extent. So he was able to expel it from his body. Wang Yuan observed Chris' actions through an infected person's gaze and praised him. The entirety of Rheostromia was his territory, even if he accepted a large number of outsiders. With Wang Yuan's personality of wanting to dominate everything, how could he not have an eye everywhere? Diffuse germs. This bacteria didn't have the strongest infectivity or unique power. The only praiseworthy point about it was its great reproductive power and stability. And currently, the diffuse germs had spread to every corner of Rheostromia, making it so that any person who lived here was basically living inside a sea of germs. Everything they breathe, eat, and drink was mixed with the germs without fail. The infectivity of these germs weren't particularly powerful, so it took an average of 2 weeks for a normal healthy person to thoroughly be infected with these germs, and even if they were infected, nothing would happen to them. At most, these germs would cause their stamina to drain a bit faster than normal. Other than that, it posed no harm to the human body. However, the diffuse germs had extremely impressive stickiness. Once a person becomes infected, it would be nearly impossible to remove these germs. As soon as they entered a human body, these germs would quickly adapt to the host constitution, multiply, and spread to every corner of the host body, and form a symbiotic relationship with them. Getting rid of these germs meant that the host must cleanse themselves thoroughly from inside to outside, and such a person would be not too far away from death. What Chris had been doing within this environment full of germs was periodically expelling the germs that entered his body like he did earlier. That rhythmic breathing method is that the rumored respiratory art. Wang Yuan recalled the strange breathing rhythm that Chris used, questioning the essence of this power. Respiratory art was one of the few supernatural powers of this world. The information Wang Yuan obtained these past years had only ever briefly mentioned the existence of such a power. Apparently, very few aristocrats or royal families still hold this method of cultivation. Through sensing the rhythm of all things and a unique breathing method. One would harmonize themselves with this rhythm and enter a heightened state that improved one's senses. Otherwise, how could a living mortal like Chris sense the microscopic germs inside his body and successfully expel them? Of course, Wang Yuan had also heard that the respiratory art had other uses and powers, but he only managed to find out that much. Today was the first time he actually saw someone perform this respiratory art. This low magic world truly was low. Currently, Wang Yuan had only discovered 3 types of supernatural power. The first belonged to the Church of Divine Grace, where they claimed that by basking in the grace of God, they obtained various powers that normal people didn't possess. Wang Yuan had also witnessed a bishop from the Church of Divine Grace who came into Rhea and confirmed that they do indeed have a bit of supernatural power. The second kind were remnant souls, or, as these people called it, evil spirits. The third was the respiratory art that Chris had just performed. Naturally, among the records that Wang Yuan had collected over the years, quite a few other kinds of supernatural powers were also mentioned. For example, the Koshi people shamans who claimed to have unlocked the spirit meaning of the word Koshi. They could supposedly connect with all things and utter the names of gods to borrow their power. Wang Yuan's righteous Noah was able to utilize a bit of this power. Next was the Roya's kingdom. This country was said to hold a supernatural power called the ancestral spirit armor. According to the records, a holder of this power could go against 100 people by themselves on the battlefield, but Wang Yuan had never seen it before. In addition to this was the most widespread supernatural power, the witch. From the records that Wang Yuan collected, witches were able to use various materials to perform their spells, some of which were nothing more than magic tricks that simply used chemical reactions, like creating fire or smoke. However, there were some actual signs of supernatural power. Wang Yuan once saw a witch performing their spell in the memories of a mercenary. That witch poured some kind of liquid out of a flask and turned a real living person into a frog. There were still many supernatural power records in this world, but a large majority of them were only presumed to have existed, while the others had already been lost in this world. Perhaps their heritage was cut off at some point. I need to get this respiratory art into my hands. Wang Yuan had such a thought. Respiratory art was the art of perceiving and using rhythm. It had very little relation to true spirit and origin. Even if Wang Yuan couldn't use respiratory art, it didn't hurt for him to obtain the knowledge as a part of his foundation for the future. I also need to speed up my research on Nala. This was Wang Yuan's main research topic for the last few years. Nala's mother came from the children of dragon Tagula family, a family said to be able to awaken the bloodline of the dragon. Perhaps it was due to Wang Yuan's germs, or perhaps a reaction to the mixed bloodline of the Koshi and the Tagula family. But the dragon bloodline that had laid dormant in the Tagula family for several generations had now begun to awaken within this little girl. And the dragon bloodline had half fused with Wang Yuan's germs from when she was still inside Isabella's womb, making it so that Wang Yuan had no way to control them. But it was also because of this reason that Wang Yuan was able to study the dragon bloodline inside Nala's body through the germs. Through his research of the dragon bloodline these past few years, Wang Yuan had obtained quite a bit of results. For example, the diffuse germs that now existed all over Rheostromia was the result of Wang Yuan purposefully controlling the germ's mutation in an attempt to artificially create the strain of germs inside Nala's body. Even so, the diffused germs was nothing but a pleasant byproduct of his experimentation. He was still far from achieving the ideal germs in his mind. In Nala's body that contained the dragon bloodline that had half fused with his germs was the perfect petri dish. Mama, today I sold quite a bit of fabric again. Aren't I great? The little Nala looked up at Isabella seeking praise. A faint golden gleam briefly appeared in her eyes before vanishing without a trace. Nala is the best. Isabella jokingly pinched her daughter's face and encouraged her. Because Jacob was branded as a sinner, Isabella and Nala were branded the wife and daughter of a sinner. They became outcast by the others, struggling to survive day by day. Since long ago, she had wanted to leave this place, but it always ended in failure. Her first attempt was to seduce a smuggler and wanted to leave Rheostromia together with the smuggler's cargo. But the very next day, that smuggler was found dead in his room, bleeding black blood from his mouth and nose. Her second attempt was a powerful mercenary. That very night, Isabella saw nothing but despair as over 100 crows flew out from the great tree that was now considered the town's forbidden zone, turning into a black cloud of death. The so-called powerful mercenary was reduced to a pile of bones in mere seconds. Her third attempt was not too long ago when a clergyman from the Church of Divine Grace came to Rheostromia. Because of her trust towards the Church of Divine Grace, Isabella once again chose to try escaping this city with him, but was instead shown how terrifying that personage was. Even with dark clouds in her heart, Isabella had never shown it on her face. She had given up on the idea of escape, and because of Rheostromia's development and expansion these last few years, she and her daughter could live quite well from her weave fabric. Chris only observed them from afar a bit before leaving this place. He was constantly breathing rhythmically. His body felt like it had melted into the air itself. While sensing the air and its rhythm, he began to take a stroll around Rheostromia. In the morning, Rhea was a lively town. Many merchants and mercenaries busily moved around the streets and alleyways here. Many merchants of the two countries became smugglers that gathered in this place, trading the specialty products of their own country. The closer the war seems to be, the more active the trading became. For example, a certain kind of fruitcakes of the Intercam kingdom was always well-liked by aristocrats of the Royas kingdom. But as the relations between the countries became tense, Intercam would naturally not bother to allow trade of such products just to please them. And so, the smuggling of these fruitcakes became abnormally popular. A confectionery product could suddenly be sold at the price of gold, and merchants were known to do anything for the sake of profits. Chris could see the prosperity of this town, as well as the deep currents running underneath that prosperity. More importantly, he could see the people hiding among the crowd, and Chris knew exactly why they had come. Half a year earlier, someone had sought out a witch and asked her where the future of the weakening Intercam kingdom lies. That which naturally gave them an answer. She prophesied that in the future, a saintress of salvation would appear in the Intercam kingdom. Her appearance would save the kingdom, and she was the daughter of Dragon and the grace of God, a true purest one. After leaving her prophecy, the witch disappeared without a trace. While this unreliable-sounding prophecy was spread among the high society of the Intercam kingdom, causing quite a few to believe in it. After half a year of searching, everyone focused their attention on the daughter of Dragon part of the prophecy, as the founding king of the Intercam kingdom in the legend was the son of Dragon, someone who had the immense power of dragons. This prophecy naturally caused everyone to think of the royal bloodline. Because of that, several young ladies from the royal bloodline suddenly passed away without clear reasons. Seth I wasn't known as a person who would give up and let go. Additionally, while the clergyman from the Church of Divine Grace failed to rescue Isabella and Nala, he managed to inform Cardinal Augustine of the Church of Divine Grace about their existence. Because of that, the portion of people in Intercam who believed in the prophecy formulated a plan to save this mother-daughter pair. It wasn't appropriate to rally the main forces of the Intercam kingdom either, as the Intercam king at this point was still Seth I. If he wanted to eliminate Isabella while she was outside of the palace, it was quite simple. Both sides had their worries. Seth I didn't want any saintress of salvation, real or not, to be out of his reach, while Augustine's group was worried that the Intercam kingdom would become even more chaotic if Isabella and her daughter were to be exposed. And so, Cardinal Augustine asked his good friend Chris to help rescue Isabella, while the group who were currently monitoring Isabella were those who supported Seth I. There are currently 4 different forces in this place. Chris analyzed the situation. The first is the master of this place, Negary, the rational evil spirit. His power is the greatest here, including the Koshi people, the unknown germs, as well as the crows under his control. For some unknown reason, he's keeping Isabella and her daughter in this place. He's the biggest obstacle. The second are Seth I's spies. There were quite a few experts among them, and their goal is to kill Isabella and her daughter, but when necessary, they would also become a force to help me go against Negary. Thirdly are the local mercenaries and merchants. They are a neutral party that could swing to any sides with enough benefits, but due to the existence of the germs, they could also instead become our enemies. And finally are us. Augustine would bring his men here soon, and my current mission is to gather enough information while keeping Isabella and her daughter safe. Chris was wondering about how to accomplish this. Saint Teresa's salvation, Recalling that strange but cheerful little girl, Chris was thinking rapidly. He briefly remembered the person he met in the great snowy mountain, touched the scar on his face, shook his head, and continued to consider his plan. The members of the youth group are mostly Koshi people that definitely have contact with Negary, but I wonder what reactions they would have with my request. Will they reject me, chase me out, or send people to kill me? Chris recalled the information he had. RS. The flock of almost 1,000 crows was the biggest threat. If they really attacked him, he would have no way to survive. But from the information given by the Church of Divine Grace, evil spirits need constant subsistence. It wouldn't be easy for Negary to send out too many crows to attack him in Rheostromia, where so many people gather. If he did that, it would instead cause Rheostromia to decline instead. An evil spirit that requires subsistence to exist would be unwilling to see this happen. As for the threat of the germs and disease, Chris didn't need to worry much as he had the respiratory art. As long as he periodically adjusted his body's rhythm and expelled those germs out of his body, there would be no problem. The main problem now is the one who killed Bucadal. Bucadal was the clergyman who came here at first. He had the grace of God, so he wasn't too much weaker than Chris, and he wasn't killed by the crows. At the time, he had used a secret means of the Church of Divine Grace to send out the news that Isabella was here and that he was being pursued by an unknown person. Unfortunately, after sending that message out, Bucadal was never heard from again. The Church of Divine Grace had also used their own means to confirm that Bucadal was dead. Chris' expression turned serious as he stopped in the middle of an alleyway. The white ring he was wearing began to give off a unique rhythm within his perception. Is this where Bucadal died? Chris sensed the vibration of his ring and observed his surroundings. This was a ring of oath from the Church of Divine Grace. The clergyman Bucadal made a vow with this ring to his God. He had formed an oath with this ring at the moment he did so. It was also through this ring that Bucadal managed to keep contact with Cardinal Augustine, who was at the headquarters of the Church of Divine Grace in Intercam, and sent his final words. Are you wailing too? Chris placed the ring on the ground and pressed his hand down. His breathing became extremely heavy. A strange flow of power came from Chris' hand and spread all around. Heart vibration. Chris's expression turned serious. Bucadal, let me see it. Who was it that killed you? Let me hear your final whispers. Caw-caw. Be careful. Those crows won't attack in areas with dense populations. But we have to take into account the possibility of him lashing out. Bucadal held the wound on his shoulder as he hurriedly spoke. Next to him, Isabella hugged the sleeping Nala in her chest with a fearful expression. Mr. Bucadal, don't worry about us. We won't be able to run away from here. That demon, he won't let go of me. Have no fear, child. The Lord will watch over us. A white glow appeared on Bucadal's hand where he was holding his wound. The black blood was directly expelled from his body. When he brought Isabella and her daughter away, 2 crows had ambushed him. Their razor-sharp claws easily ripped his priest's clothes and left several large holes of blood. But he easily killed those 2 crows thanks to his grace. My Lord granted me his grace to give salvation to others. Because of his grace, I refuse to give up on anybody worth saving. I shall extend my helping hand towards any being that requires my aid. Bucadal smiled amiably and consoled Isabella. I've already hired a carriage on the busy main road of the town. We'll be fine as long as we leave Rheostromia, Bucadal told her. But Bucadal wasn't as relaxed as he appeared to be. First of all, if the other side didn't care about pedestrians and send out a large number of crows, he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. When a flock of crows reaches such a number, It was similar to a natural disaster that no single person could resist. Only a well-organized army might be able to. Furthermore, the existence of a rational evil spirit was even more concerning. No such evil spirits had ever appeared before, at least not in the Church of Divine Grace's records. It was surely very dangerous. The evil spirit, called Negary, definitely had powers other than the crows. Samira. A faint chant resounded from afar, followed by a gust of stormwind. Bucatle's expression changed as he shifted his body to dodge. As the wind swept by, a wound appeared on his face, spilling blood everywhere. My Lord's grace grants me the power to protect others. Bucatle chanted his prayers, summoning a faint white glow around his body to protect against whatever was inside the wind. As the gust of wind died down, Bucatle's expression was still solemn. Samira, the Koshi god of storms. Bucatle knew the Koshi people's legend to an extent. A spirit shaman? Do the Koshi people still inherit this power? Let's leave this place first. The Koshi crowmen are only responsible for preserving order in Rhea. They don't have a reason to stop an aristocrat from returning to their country. Isabella was still an aristocrat. So if she declared her status, unless Riestromia was prepared to completely turn against Intercam, they would have no excuse to stop them from leaving. Bucatle brought Isabella to the carriage he hired ahead of time and began to escape towards the Intercam capital. While driving the carriage, Bucatle was paying close attention to his surroundings. Nuella. Another faint chant resounded, causing Bucatle's expression to change. A piece of the floorboard on the carriage suddenly glowed green and began to grow. In just a few dozen seconds, the carriage itself was broken by the overgrown piece of wood. The horses also lost control and ran away. With tilde o epsilon. Nuella, the Koshi god of new leaves and growth. The broken pieces of wood that made up the carriage was now beginning to grow lively green sprouts. Bucatle crouched down on one knee, his body glowing white while protecting Isabella and Nala behind him. He knew that this situation couldn't keep going. The more he tried to avoid fighting, the worse the situation would become. So the only choice right now was to find the person hiding in the shadows and defeat them to bring Isabella and her daughter away safely. Cardinal Augustine, please listen carefully. There seems to be a spirit shaman serving Negary in Riestromia. They are currently pursuing me. I have no choice but to fight. Please wait for my good news. Through a secret technique, he sent these words to his ring of oath placed in the Church of Divine Grace headquarters. Bucatle then drew the sword he carried at his hip, pressed the flat side against his forehead, and whispered his prayers. My Lord's grace grant me the eyes that see through all. Over there, dispel this darkness. A rune manifested on Bucatle's forehead, giving him a strange sense of sight that allowed him to discover the one ambushing them. His body flashed while still chanting and swung his glowing sword towards that side. Samira, an intense gust of wind was once again summoned to attack Bucatle. However, the sword in his hand seems to contain some sort of unimaginable power that allowed him to slice the wind open and reveal the person standing behind it. It was a young man wearing neat clothing and a calm expression on his face, together with his long black hair. He appeared to be aloof and cold. He was also holding a book in his hand. With how sharp Bucatle's eyes were, he easily recognized the book was the Divine Grace Holy Bible used for missionary purposes that narrated various myths. A young man. Bucatle wasn't looking down on him at all. The Koshi people once united the entire continent and formed the Great Trilancia Empire, of which the spirit shamans contributed greatly. When the Trilancia Empire broke apart and fell, the Koshi people were scattered all over the continent, causing the inheritance of the spirit shaman to also be cut off. But now that a young man suddenly appeared and held this supposed lost power, then he couldn't underestimate him even more. Young man, I don't care why you and the one behind you want to keep Isabella and her daughter here, but she's an aristocrat of the Intercam kingdom, as well as a devout believer of our Church of Divine Grace. I will bring them away from this land. My Lord's grace grants me power. Bucatle pointed his sword at Noah and spoke in a heavy tone. God grants thee covenant. Thus his grace grants thee thine power. Noah recited a line from the Divine Grace Holy Bible, then threw the Bible to one side, looking at Bucatel with a cold gaze. Then my apologies. From today, your covenant with your God shall end permanently. Herlo, Noah chanted the name of the God of strength, calling upon the spirit of strength in the world and imbuing his body with physical prowess. Samira, intense wind once again began to pick up. The wind was indeed strong, but the most it could do was make someone topple over from losing balance. The true threat came from hidden things inside the wind. If you carelessly let them sweep across you, a long wound would be drawn on your body. Bucatel wasn't panicked. Once he fought without holding back, his fighting strength could easily rank among the top of this world. He had a total of 5 graces gifted from God. The grace of salvation, capable of curing wounds and diseases. The grace of protection, capable of forming a barrier that shields against damage. The grace of understanding, capable of forming a special sight to observe things that normal people can't see. The grace of justice, capable of cutting apart anything he deems to be unjust. The grace of vitality, capable of giving the owner a powerful physique. It was because Bucatel managed to take 5 graces from God that he became the most powerful warrior of divine grace among everyone in the Church of Divine Grace. My Lord's grace declares my power to be just. Young man, for serving an evil spirit, I declare you unjust, and I shall cut you down. Bucatel wielded the sword in his hand high. Glowing with the light of faith, he cut the wind apart, not allowing the things inside it to approach him. The grace of vitality gave him a powerful body that allowed him to immediately shorten his distance with Noah. Stromiano. Noah wasn't panicked. He calmly and swiftly chanted the name of the God of the Wall. Several invisible things quickly converged and stopped in front of Bucatel's sword. Black liquid splashed everywhere as a wall of meat suddenly manifested in front of Noah. The wall itself looked like it was made from black, squirming pieces of meat. So as it was hit by Bucatel's sword, it started to bleed a black liquid while squirming even more intensely, trying to swallow the sword whole. Blasphemous thing. Bucatel scowled. The sword in his hand glowed brightly and sliced the wall of meat apart, melting it into a pile of black liquid. The rune on his head still shining. Bucatel stared intensely at the calm Noah and couldn't help himself praising the young man. This boy only looked to be about 10 years old, but he wasn't panicked in the face of trouble, almost like he could maintain his calm at anything. Even the most talented youths of the Church of Divine Grace pale in comparison to him. Bucatel sighed. As he was an enemy, the more talented he was, the more he needed to be eliminated. As a follower of evil, my hands of salvation do not reach out to you. I am sorry for that. Bucatel didn't say much and stepped in, stabbing Noah with his sword imbued with the power of justice. Clergyman, what do you think we're fighting? Noah looked at the tip of the sword coming for him without a shred of fear. He understood very well that if this was a real clash of strength, he couldn't win against Bucatel. Even his powers as a spirit shaman was only at an amateur level. The few god names that he was able to use right now was a result of long trial and error over the years. They were far from enough for a real fight. The only reason they could exert this much power at all was because he was standing in the territory of his lord. Negary, unlike the other god names, Noah was chanting this name with extreme respect, as this was his lord to whom he offered his forehead, his lord with whom he had a covenant with since birth, his lord to whom his loyalty belonged to for the rest of his life. The germs in the air began to quickly gather. Using the god, named Noah, chanted as a catalyst, the germs stuck to one another and manifested as a black blob of flesh. The blob of flesh easily caught Bucatel's sword. The black flesh was still constantly shifting and forming, slowly manifesting a humanoid shape. White mucus then began to flow from the black flesh and quickly dried up to form a layer of pale white skin. Finally, a fully naked man had appeared in front of Bucatel, tightly gripping the blade of his sword. Noah took off his coat and draped it over the shoulder of his man before respectfully stepping to one side. N.E.G.A.Re. Bucatel loudly shouted, wanting to swing his sword, but felt an overwhelming force holding his sword in place. unable to move it at all. As soon as he saw the man, an ominous feeling attacked his psyche, telling him that the one in front of him was indeed the Koshi god of legend, the embodiment of disease and omen, Negary. You may call me that clergyman of the Church of Divine Grace. Wang Yuan didn't refute Bucadal. He was only a remnant soul without a true spirit, so he naturally didn't have a true name. Calling him Wang Yuan or Negary held the same meaning. Is this the power of grace that belongs to the Church of Divine Grace? How interesting. Wang Yuan gripped Bucadal's sword tightly to sense the unique power imbued in it as he stiffly moved his body forward. This body was created from countless germs, so it didn't have a skeleton, inner organs, or blood vessels. It only looked human, but it was still, in essence, a cluster of germs being controlled by Wang Yuan's manipulation over viruses. And with diary success, my Lord's grace grants me the power of justice. I shall cut through the darkness. Bucadal declared and channeled grace from all over his body into his sword as a blinding bright light. But the result only caused Bucadal to feel despair. The sword was still tightly gripped by Negary. The power of grace granted to him didn't cause Negary even a little bit of damage. How is that possible? Bucadal shouted in disbelief. Nothing is impossible, Wang Yuan smiled. As I have seen through the nature of your grace of justice, I no longer need to fear this power. Everything that exists has a weakness, and because I have found your weakness, you can no longer win. Weakness? Bucadal suddenly thought of something. The rune on his forehead glowed as he looked down at the sword in his hand, finally noticing that the essence of the sword had changed at some point. The grace of justice, in essence, is the power to reject all things, but this power is based on my beliefs, and the belief I established is to cut down anything with my sword. But now this sword has been completely replaced by Negary. Bucadal saw that his sword was covered in countless black lines. The sword had already broken into tiny pieces at some point, completely relying on germs to hold it together. Because of this, the germs had become a part of the sword, while the fragments of the sword had also become part of the germs. And the grace of justice couldn't act on germs. Cock! Bucadal abruptly crouched down and spat out a mouthful of blood. Without me knowing, my body has been filled with germs as well. Bucadal let go of his sword to see that his hands were covered in wounds. A large number of germs went into his body through these wounds. My Lord's grace grants me the power to protect others. Grace of salvation. While he was coughing up black blood, Bucadal's faith was stronger than ever. His body glowed with luxuriant light. A huge amount of white smoke left his body. The grace of salvation has the power to heal wounds and cure diseases. Wang Yuan didn't bother to stop him at all and simply observed as Bucadal attempted to remove the germs inside his body. I think you understand already. The germs have eaten through too much of your body and has become an irreplaceable part of you. Removing them like this can help you escape from the bane of the germs, but you wouldn't be too far from death. Devil, what are you trying to say? Bucadal glared straight at Negary as wounds began to open up on his body and amounts of black blood overflowed from them without stopping. Surrender yourself to me. Wang Yuan offered Bucadal his hand. Even the grace of salvation won't heal your current wounds. And so, surrender yourself to me. Let my germs pour into your body. Offer your forehead to me. Accept my blessing and become a symbiote with the germs. Under the aid of my germs, you will be able to continue living. Are you questioning my faith, devil? Bucadal shouted in anger as 5 white runes appeared all over his body. Salvation, protection, understanding, justice, and vitality. You are angry. You are wavering, aren't you? Wang Yuan laughed as his finger began to extend indefinitely, turning into black tentacles of germs that slowly stretched towards Bucadal. You are also afraid of death, clergyman. Your Lord did not grant you the power to fight against death. You are using your anger to hide your fear towards death. Clergyman, surrender yourself to me, and you will find that you no longer have anything to fear. Wang Yuan's words contained an indescribable sense of charm, as if they were able to directly affect the deepest part of one's inner thoughts. During these 10 years, Wang Yuan had absorbed the soul essence of so many people that he had an acute understanding of the human heart. He accurately grasped the fears of humans and was using them to stimulate Buketel's mind. The white glow around Buketel's body gradually weakened. The black germ tentacles had already reached him, pierced through his skin, and spread all over his body through his blood vessels. "Accept my blessing, aha!" Wang Yuan laughed as he poured the germs into Buketel's body. "I truly am afraid of death. Even now, my body trembles from the thought that I would no longer live." Buketel's voice was exceedingly calm at this moment. "My Lord truly did not grant me the power to face death, but the Lord's existence grants me the belief that I can fight even against death." After the calm was a thunderous, powerful storm. "Die, devil!" Intense light came out from Buketel's body, following the germ tentacles back towards Wang Yuan. At the very moment the germs pierced into his body, he became Buketel's disease, which meant he could be cured. Hack, hack, hack. As the light faded, the humanoid figure was covered in smoke. The smoke was the germs that had been cured, but after only a few moments, the dead germs turned to ash and fell to the ground, revealing the black blob of flesh inside. The blob of flesh once again morphed and overflowed with white mucus, and Wang Yuan reappeared before Buketel in mere seconds. "Ha! Your plan was very decent, but you know too little about me. I've already considered the possibility of sudden attacks since a long time ago. That is why I purposefully model this body this way. My body doesn't need to be closely connected to the human body. My skin is formed by dead mucus germs. This makes it so that I'm like a matryoshka, one layer after the next. This type of non-piercing outside attack can only kill the outermost layer of my body. And inside this environment of germs, my body can regenerate in just a heartbeat. You won't even reach the innermost layer of my body." Wang Yuan approached Buketel again and spoke. "One last chance, offer your forehead to me." "That's impossible, devil." Buketel collapsed on the ground. He was feeling his death to be closer than ever before. He was afraid of death, but his faith towards God gave him the belief to overcome this fear. "Then there is no other way. However, in my eyes, your faith has been cooked into the most charming delicacy. Even if I can't tame you, a nice meal is decent as well." Wang Yuan once again reached his hand out to the dying Buketel. Whenever Wang Yuan faced his enemies during the past few years, he would stimulate the other party within a certain limit. If the other party couldn't endure it, then they would simply choose to surrender to Wang Yuan. But if they were able to endure and keep to their faith until the very end, to Wang Yuan who wanted to absorb their soul essence, this faith was the ultimate delicacy. And the unyielding tenacity that Buketel displayed right here had only made his soul become more delicious. Not to mention the secrets of the Church of Divine Grace within his memories. "Your unyielding tenacity and faith, I shall accept. As you said, we know too little about you, Negary, but there is no need to hurry. I shall send this information back to the rest, and they will triumph over you, Negary." Buketel now recalled the information he knew about evil spirits. With diuresis, the Church of Divine Grace had studied evil spirits quite a bit, so they knew that a person killed by an evil spirit would have their memories read to a certain extent. But as people graced by the Lord, their everything had already been dedicated to the Lord. How could they allow a soul that belongs to God to be tainted? So the Church of Divine Grace created a certain secret technique that allowed members to turn their soul into a unique wave when they die. This secret technique protected the members of the Church of Divine Grace from being tainted by the evil spirit, at the same time recording the final whispers of the dead, preserving his final memories. Only people of the Church of Divine Grace or an expert, respiratory art, user who could sense rhythm and waves would be able to read the information inside. No soul essence came out. Wang Yuan stood in front of Buketel's body, feeling a bit puzzled. As he recalled Buketel's final act, he chuckled and left under Noah's respectful watch. "These final whispers of yours, how can I not accept it?" "Buketel." Chris stood up with anger on his expression. "Negary, following Buketel's last wish, I will definitely defeat you." Hack, hack, hack. Under the great tree, Wang Yuan opened his eyes and chuckled. I'll be waiting to see that. Damn it. That Koshi youth from earlier was the spirit shaman. Chris' expression turned grim. He had already assumed that the Koshi people and Negary were inseparably connected, but he didn't think that the young man he saw was actually a spirit shaman. I really wonder what kind of answer would they give to my provocation. Chris now understood his enemy a bit better. Negary might be even more powerful than we had assumed. From Bucatel's memories, Negary offered him to become a symbiote with the germs. This could allow a person to break through the limits of humanity, which means those who surrendered themselves to Negary would become even more terrifying. In fact, from what he saw in Bucatel's memories, Chris couldn't help but admit that the other party gave off an almost irresistible sense of charm, a fatal air of danger, as well as a deep, ominous feeling. If a weak-willed person were to face Negary, they would definitely choose to surrender to him from the pressure alone. "Are you Mr. Chris?" A voice suddenly called out. Chris followed the voice to see a man in a black robe standing not too far away from the alleyway, looking at him. As Lord Comoros ordered, "I'm here as your guide." "We've accepted your request," the black-robed man spoke in a low tone. "We will arrange for a meeting between you and Isabella's mother-daughter pair. But whether or not you can bring them away would depend on how good you are." "Really now?" Chris looked at the black-robed man standing in front of him. He knew that he was one of the peacekeepers of Rheostromia, a Koshi crowman. Through his rhythm, Chris could sense the strange vitality from his body. Has he been modified by Negary? Chris silently thought and wondered to himself how he should defeat him if a conflict were to happen. "Please follow me." The black-robed man turned around and headed for another direction. Chris squinted his eyes a bit before following suit. Unlike Chris, who was only a vanguard, Augustine and the rest of the Church of Divine Grace's top brass found themselves greatly hindered on the way here. Before Chris came here, the upper echelons of the Intercam Kingdom had done quite a bit of both open and under-the-table transactions for this matter. If nothing changes, Augustine should arrive with reinforcements very soon. Only at that point would they feel confident in being able to bring Isabella out of this place. Otherwise, Chris alone would find it very difficult to protect both Isabella and her daughter. "This is the place, Mr. Chris. Please come in." The black-robed crowman led Chris to a luxurious manor and opened the door for him. "Thank you." Chris spoke with a low voice and headed inside without much hesitation. "No need to thank me, Mr. Chris. I'm very impressed with the tales of your exploits. I really hope we get a chance to fight," the black-robed crowman respectfully said, pulled down his hood to reveal a face full of black stripes. "My name is Nosades. I'll be waiting for that day." Chris glanced at the stripes on Nosades' face, nodded, and entered the manor, walked through a long hallway before arriving at the center room, where he saw a young man praying. "Legendary adventurer Chris Modo, it's an honor to meet you. I am Comoros." The young man finished praying and stood up. Comoros still maintained a youthful look of about 18 to 19 years old. These 10 years hadn't greatly affected his outer image, but if you took a look at his aura and general atmosphere, you'd find that he had completely changed. Originally, Comoros was only a cowardly young man whose insanity was awoken. But if anyone saw him now, they would think of the same description: eerie. It was as if something horrifying was hidden in the depths of this person's heart. And if you were to let your guard down for even a single moment, the horrifying existence would jump out from his body and devour those looking at him. "Lord Comoros, it's an honor to meet you." When Chris saw how eerie this young man was in front of him, he recalled the information he collected about Comoros. It was him who brought the faith of Negary back to this place. It was also him who created and led the Crowman peacekeepers of Rheostromia through Negary's orders. In Rheostromia, other than Negary, he was the one who had the most authority, a position of being below 1 and above 10,000. But after meeting him face-to-face through respiratory art, Chris was sharply able to notice that Comoros' rhythm was imbalanced. The core concept of respiratory art was to harmonize oneself with the rhythm of all things through certain breathing techniques. Since the human body was also part of all things, it naturally had its own rhythm. Furthermore, each person's rhythm was unique and would change depending on their current state. An excellent respiratory art Practitioner could clearly tell the imbalance within another person's rhythm through their heightened senses and could even point out where the imbalance lies. Because of this, most disguises were useless in front of a respiratory art practitioner unless they could somehow change their own natural rhythm. And the rhythm he could sense from Camaro's was extremely strange, even stranger than those of the crowmen. The crowmen's rhythms were strange because something foreign had been mixed in with them and caused their rhythm to become warped, but Camaro's rhythm felt like two types of completely different rhythms were forced together. This chaotic and ominous feeling that provokes fear simply just by sensing its rhythm. This is Negary, huh? Chris exhaled deeply. This Camaro's in front of me might as well be Negary himself. Over half of his existence has already been corroded by Negary, turning him into a puppet that only knows to obey. Isabella and her daughter are currently in the guest room at the back. You may go see them. As for whether or not they are willing to come with you is your business, Camaro's calmly spoke. And also, do not disrupt Rhea's order. Chris lightly nodded and went past Camaro's to go into the guest room, only to see the hesitant and uneasy Isabella, as well as the curious Nala sitting at the table. Greetings, Lady Isabella. Chris greeted the mother and daughter pair while using respiratory art to sense their rhythms. Isabella's rhythm was quite normal, besides a large amount of germs inside her body from living in Rhea for too long. She only had a few minor diseases. But what really caused Chris to feel shocked was Nala. The rhythm of this little girl was even a bit stronger than Chris' own. There was even the sound of a dragon's growl coming from her rhythm. Not even the widespread germs all over the town managed to enter her body. The dragon's bloodline has been awakened. So Nala is the saintress of salvation in the prophecy. As Chris saw a golden gleam in Nala's pure and clear eyes, he finally believed the witch's prophecy. I trust that your ladyship can already guess why I came here. Please prepare yourself. After a bit more time, there will be people who are coming to escort your ladyship back home. Chris glanced at Isabella, who had a complicated expression on her face. Isabella's lips trembled a bit before she finally spoke. I refuse. Too many people have sacrificed themselves because of us. Isabella spoke with a pained expression. I saw clergyman Bucatel die in front of me. That personage would definitely not let me go. I think you've mistaken something. Chris smiled and shook his head. I'm not like that fool Bucatel. You. Isabella looked at Chris in surprise. Bucatel wanted to bring you away because of his faith. He wanted to extend his hands towards anybody that is worth saving. But look at you now. You've already given up on yourself. You didn't deserve Bucatel's salvation. But me, I'm a mercenary who took on a job. Bringing you out of here is nothing but a mission. I don't need to care about your will. It's fine if you want to be saved. It doesn't matter if you don't. I'll take you out of here regardless. After all, Bucatel paid his life as the reward for this job. Chris turned around to leave and spoke with an exceptionally serious tone. That is why I will complete this job regardless of what needs to be done. Only then would I live up to the reward that fool paid. Isabella looked at Chris as he left, unable to hold back her tears. Her fate had always been full of ups and downs. Born as an aristocrat, her family was caught in internal conflict and forced her to escape by herself to the border into a Koshi village. She was fortunate to find the love of her life, but he was brutally killed in front of her eyes when she was pregnant. She was forced to give birth to her daughter alone and struggled to raise her while living under the constant shadow of a devil. If Isabella wasn't a strong-willed woman, if she didn't have her daughter to take care of, if Jacob did not wish for her to live on before he died, she would have already gone mad a long time ago. Mommy, don't cry. Everything will be over soon. Nala hugged her mother and consoled her. Two black-robed crowmen stood outside the window looking down at Isabella and her daughter with cold eyes. And here I thought Isabella was already scared to death. Now it seems like she once again has the will to escape. One of the black-robed men spoke. Or perhaps I should say, as expected of the legendary adventurer. From the looks of it, I'll get a chance to fight with this living legend after all. The other one grinned, apparently very pleased with this result. Do it if you want to. No Zades. He's your idol after all. It was because of his legends that you decided to go adventuring in the first place. Yeah. The other black-robed man headed for Isabella and continued to speak. Leave Isabella's side to us. They're the ones that the Great One ordered us to watch over. Besides this adventurer, there might be others who want to take them away. Understood, Captain Yadley. Noseades nodded with a serious expression. Chris was my idol, but with Lord Negary's blessing, I can definitely defeat him. After all, the greatest respect you can pay to your idol is to defeat them yourself. Comoros once again continued to pray, ignoring both Chris and the crow men who were about to act. Looking at the holy effigy covered in crows, Comoros could only pray again and again in order to numb himself. Even though his body was still his own, he understood fully that he didn't have much time left. The sound of footsteps approached him from behind, causing Comoros to freeze briefly before relaxing again. He stood up and looked back at the handsome young man who just came in. The boy's appearance was similar to his own. The closeness of their blood seemed to make Comoros become somber, even if only a little bit. I didn't think it would be you. Comoros seemed to have given up completely. Only a broken smile could be seen on his face. Is this the Lord's cruel joke? I just happened to be free. Noah spoke calmly. Even though he knew the relationship between himself and this person, even though he knew exactly what was about to happen, he wasn't at all concerned. Comoros' heart went completely cold. In the end, he was still the same cowardly youth. Even now, he didn't dare to refer to the Lord by name. In his fright, he almost felt like he had returned to that moment of 10 years ago. Facing a trapped flock of crows with a bow in his hand, Uncle Dax fell on one side, black blood flowing from his mouth, roaring for him to kill the crows, giving him the courage to fire those last crucial shots. But a second later, the fishing net was ripped apart. That person, no, that devil emerged from the crows, cruel and ominous. All of Comoros' courage was blown away simply by seeing that figure. What exactly do you want with me? Comoros roared in his frenzy. Can't I even try to resist you in my dreams? To think of resisting you in my mind? Foolish one, didn't you already offer your forehead to me? Why do you still fear me so? Wang Yuan simply smiled while standing among the corpses. Simply by standing there, he gave off a sense of wild beauty and indescribable charm. And Beta, it was also this charm that caused so many people to surrender themselves to him. The Koshi, the Kent, mercenaries, merchants, even heroic adventurers and faithful clerics couldn't escape the fate of being controlled by this existence. The more he felt that to be the case, the more pained and mad Comoros became, because it was him that brought this devil from the wilderness and spread his influence to the Koshi people. It was his influence that caused Comoros to be isolated, to become a detached leader, as well as an experimental specimen that could be discarded at will. You are too foolish, Comoros. Wang Yuan stepped closer and closer to Comoros. If you felt so pained and so sorrowful, then give up on those unimportant matters, be it your morals or your emotions, and surrender yourself completely to me. That way, everything that troubles you will no longer carry any meaning. Wang Yuan stood in front of Comoros and extended his hand. Tell me your choice, Comoros. My merciful self has already helped you remove all other options, and so regardless of what you choose, you will no longer feel pain. Ahaha! Comoros stared at Wang Yuan's extended hand and laughed frenziedly. Just as Wang Yuan had said, he was pushed into a corner without any choice but death. He walked forward, away from his illusion. The one standing before him was no longer Wang Yuan, but Noah, his younger brother. Noah. Brother, if you can, please pass on my apology to Father. Comoros hugged Noah and left his final words. At this point, he no longer had anything to fear. Pushing the knife through his heart, Noah pushed Comoros' dead body away without any emotions, followed the teachings of the Lord, and collected the golden blood flowing from Comoros' heart. He then turned around and told the crowmen who appeared outside, put the criminal Chris Moto on the region's wanted list. Charge, killing the former leader Comoros. You're finally showing a bit of devotion, Comoros. Wang Yuan stood under the shades of a tree, glanced at the rotten body being pecked by the crows, and gave his once servant one final comment. With a box-shaped container in his hands, Noah entered a secret room. Inside this container was the golden blood he extracted from Comoros, who was also his older brother. 10 years ago, when Nala was born, Wang Yuan had begun to study the awakening dragon bloodline inside Nala's body. Wang Yuan had never stopped studying the dragon bloodline during these past 10 years, the most widely adopted application of which was the diffuse germs that exist all over Rheostromia and slowly spreading to the areas around it. Other than that, the research that Wang Yuan valued the most had begun to take shape 3 years ago. The dragon bloodline inside Nala's body had the following characteristics. Number 1. The dragon bloodline can alter the host's bodily constitution, causing the vitality of someone with the dragon bloodline to be exceptionally tenacious. Number 2. There was some inheritance information hidden inside the bloodline, as well as a type of power named Dragon's Pressure. A person who has awakened their dragon bloodline will slowly learn Dracatongue, as well as develop to become like a dragon. Wang Yuan had checked the profiles of those who awakened dragon bloodline in the Intercam Kingdom's history records. Without exception, they all had unique characteristics: powerful, whimsical, gluttonous, greedy, and like to sleep. And even more so, they all had an extreme sense of personal charm, making it so that many people were more than willing to follow and die alongside them. What surprised Wang Yuan the most was that during the entire Intercam Kingdom history, not once had a woman been able to awaken the dragon bloodline. Perhaps it was Wang Yuan's germs that caused Nala to mutate just enough to awaken the dragon bloodline. Simply put, during these few years, Nala had indeed awoken some dragon characteristics. Regretfully for Wang Yuan, he wasn't someone who inherited the dragon bloodline. He had been able to extract the inheritance information within the dragon bloodline, but he didn't understand a single word of Dracatongue. He had already tried searching for someone who knew Dracatongue, but to no avail. Number 3. Dragon's blood has an inseparable connection with itself. Even the dragon's blood that was extracted from Nala still held a firm connection to her. The golden blood inside Comoros' heart was dragon's blood that Wang Yuan extracted from Nala's body bit by bit through his germs. This dragon's blood was modified by Wang Yuan through injecting his own signature into it, then injected into the body of a qualified specimen to enter constant gestation. The so-called qualified specimen referred to people who could inherit the dragon bloodline. It was currently unknown if the dragon bloodline had mutated, but a qualified specimen must fulfill a total of 3 conditions, the first of which was to be infected by Wang Yuan's germs, and they must be thoroughly infected. Secondly, they must be a half-breed Koshi person. Comoros and Noah had the same mother who came from a different race of human. Anyone who fulfills those 2 conditions can be injected with dragon's blood without dying, but the carrier will slowly be unable to endure the constant dragon's pressure inside the dragon's blood and turn mad. Only those who fulfilled the 3rd condition, which was their soul nature being biased towards the dragon attribute, will be able to endure the dragon's pressure and even turn that into their own ability. There weren't many who were able to fulfill all 3 of these conditions. Among them were Comoros and Noah. But as Noah was the righteous who had a covenant with Wang Yuan, he naturally couldn't be used as an experimental specimen. There are still a lot of unstable factors within this experiment, and the dragon's blood that Wang Yuan synthesized was only a prototype. After 3 years, this dragon's blood had changed hosts a total of 5 times. Comoros was the 5th one. Thanks to Comoros, this dragon's blood had finally been completely altered and turned into soul's blood that was fully grasped in Wang Yuan's hands. Of course, you could call it by its other name, the Negary virus. Dragon's blood and soul's blood were essentially the same. However, one of them had the main attribute of dragon, while the other had the main attribute of Negary. In Wang Yuan's mind, the soul's blood could improve the host's constitution and even reinforce their minds to an extent, allowing them to awaken their spirit shaman abilities as Noah did. It with ring above. Some of the earlier prototypes Wang Yuan had could also achieve this. The reason why Wang Yuan valued soul's blood so highly was because of its 2 remaining effects. Noah looked down at the golden blood inside the container, just by shaking it a bit, he could see a jet-black liquid behind its outer golden hue. Without fear, Noah undid his clothing and picked up the ceremonial blade that was prepared earlier. He sunk the ceremonial blade into the container to soak it in the golden blood, then plunged it into his heart without hesitation. As he pulled the blade back out, not a single drop of blood was spilt. The golden blood visible on the wound on his heart moved like living creatures, quickly healing the hole made by the blade before finally forming a strange insignia on top of the scar. It looked like a crow spreading its wings to fly, but at the same time, it looked like a soaring dragon. Noah could sense that something within his body was extracted and something else was starting to be conceived. This emotionless boy appeared joyful for the very first time as he could sense it. He could sense that he was becoming a part of the Great Negary, and that he was becoming closer than ever to his God. At the same time, Nala, who was walking home with her mother, suddenly clutched her chest and felt her heartbeat becoming faster. But this feeling quickly vanished without a trace, and her eyes became even clearer than before, inhumanely clearer. Under the great forbidden tree of Rhea, Wang Yuan picked up a leaf that just dropped. He could sense his soul becoming whole at a speed greater than ever before, filling the places that he lacked. A sense of will suddenly swept across him. Something from deep inside this world started to descend upon Wang Yuan. He felt his soul becoming unprecedentedly active. Wang Yuan's soul's instinct was telling him to receive that something and put it back into the deepest part of his soul to make himself whole again. This made Wang Yuan understand what that something was. That was the most important part that was missing from him, the true spirit that he had lost, the origin of his soul, his most basic essence. If he took it and obtained another living body, he would turn into a true living being and not the remnant soul that he currently was. If he took it, he would be able to use the soul transmigration method he learned from the monster of 10 years ago and travel to another world, no longer having to worry about being trapped in this low magic world. Wang Yuan could sense it. His own soul was madly urging him to take it and reform himself. Only by reforming himself would he truly be Wang Yuan and not a remnant soul that took Wang Yuan's name. Those who hadn't experienced this feeling wouldn't understand how tempting it was to the current Wang Yuan. The feeling of once again obtaining something he had thought be lost caused Wang Yuan to almost feel addicted. Wang Yuan had offered his hand to many, encouraging them to surrender to him. And at this very moment, Wang Yuan felt that a certain existence was offering their hand to him, offering to be his God. Seeing himself almost becoming whole again, Wang Yuan suddenly took a step back. His soul began to boil and collapse. The things that once belonged to Wang Yuan was madly insisting him to return. Every step he took back was one step further from him becoming the true Wang Yuan. If that is so, from today onwards, I truly am Negary. He cut off the remnant soul of the past, supported his collapsing soul, and showed a particularly brilliant smile. Such an ominous rhythm. Chris stopped walking. His expression turned extremely difficult. He had fought the most ferocious wyverns, faced the cruelest Kent tribesmen, and countless other enemies. But this was the first time he had ever felt something this ominous. What's going on? I can sense that Negary had become weaker than ever before, but also stronger than ever. Chris' breathing began to become rhythmic, but chaotic, harmonized his own rhythm with his surroundings, and extended his senses outward, trying to see what happened. Does that shattered, chaotic rhythm belong to Negary? If we want to kill him, this is the best opportunity. Chris' expression turned serious. Even though he didn't know what happened, this was without a doubt the best chance for their goal. He could sense that with every passing second, Negary would regain a bit of strength, perhaps even gradually growing stronger. Chris changed his direction, wanting to head for the source of the rhythm, but he abruptly leapt back to dodge a rock that flew towards him. The rock hit the ground and formed a small crater, showing how fast it was flying. If a human was hit by that head-on, they would most likely die. Mr. Chris, we meet again so soon. The black-robed nose-aide showed himself not too far away from where Chris was. So you're heading for the Forbidden Zone? And you're here to stop me? Chris' gaze became focused. I wanted to fight you for a long time, Mr. Chris, or should I say, Senior. Noseade spoke with a fanatic expression. It was because of Senior's tales that I left my home and faced this complicated world. Now that I have a chance to defeat Senior with my own hands, I can hardly keep myself restrained. The Crowman's rules made it so that I can't attack Rhea's visitors without a reason, so I was trying to come up with some excuse, but not anymore, Noseades loudly declared. This person is the criminal who killed Leader Camaros. All unrelated personnel, please leave this street. Very quickly, the entire street was evacuated. In Rheastromia, the Crowmen were the peacekeepers and enforcers. They were highly disciplined soldiers that would never attack a person that hadn't disrupted Rhea's order. Of course, the Crowmen would also mercilessly slaughter those that tried to challenge Rheastromia's order. It was because of this strict order that many merchants and smugglers were attracted to this place. What flimsy framing, Chris scowled. That doesn't matter. Lord Camaros really is dead, and there were people who saw you enter his manor. That much is enough. Noseade shrugged and took off his black robe, revealing his naked upper body. Twisted black patterns and stripes were all over Noseade's body. As he moved, the lines and patterns also constantly shifted, creating a warped and uneven perception that could even cause nausea. Are those Negary's modifications? Chris stared at the black patterns while constantly sensing that ominous rhythm from afar. His breathing slowly changed. Negary is constantly recovering. I don't have time to waste on this Crowman. This is my lord's blessing, and you will be defeated by this power. Noseade's expression slowly became settled. Maintaining calm and stability in battle was the mark of a true warrior. While explosive emotions could indeed heighten one's state temporarily, it couldn't persist for long. Chris took a deep breath and threw a punch at Noseades. His punch wasn't particularly fast, but it followed a strange rhythm that made it feel like it couldn't be dodged no matter what. Noseades' black pattern shifted and threw his own punch against Chris. The inhuman power caught Chris off guard, knocking him back a short step. Lord Negary's blessing grants me superhuman speed and power. With your power alone, you aren't a match for me. Noseades wasn't in a hurry to retaliate. He slowly declared a simple truth. Oh, fast enough to follow a rhythm punch, huh? Chris didn't answer him. A combatant's mental state was crucial in battle, so quite a few people had the habit of saying things to rile their opponent up and cause them to lose their calm. Chris' rhythm punch was a patterned attack that followed the opponent's unique rhythm. Normally, it would be very hard for an opponent to react to the patterned attack, as it would go against their own natural rhythm. Something is up with those black patterns. Chris immediately noticed those black patterns surely did more than simply increase speed and power, because a mere difference in speed and power wouldn't be able to mess up his attacks. Among Chris' previous opponents, there were creatures like the Wyvern whose physical abilities far surpassed that of humans. This level of superhuman strength and speed wasn't much compared to that of a Wyvern. Chris maintained his calm and tried to match Noseade's strength with his rhythm punch again and again. Each of Chris' punches was aimed at an awkward position for Noseades, but he would perfectly block them every time. Very strangely, Noseades hadn't tried to retaliate at all. Even with his advantage of speed and power, he never actively attacked Chris even once. I'm quite disappointed, Senior. I thought you would be a bit stronger than this. Noseades once again parried Chris' punch and suddenly declared, Respiratory art can indeed allow you to attack a human's weakness, but with Lord Negary's blessing, I've already transcended the limit of humans. Noseades abruptly changed his defensive game plan and proactively threw a punch against Chris. Even more shockingly, Chris noticed that Noseades was using his rhythm punch. This pattern punch that struck at a person's weakness couldn't possibly be used without knowing respiratory art. Chris barely managed to avoid Noseades' punch and paid attention to Noseades' breathing. That's not right. His breathing isn't following the rules of respiratory art. Chris scowled and once again took a deep breath. His own rhythm instantly harmonized with the environment again as he threw an unbelievable punch at Noseades. If rhythm punch was the technique to attack an enemy's weakness, then Chris' current attack was taking advantage of his own harmonization with the environment to perform a silent punch. Because a silent punch was performed in perfect harmonization with its surroundings, This attack was met with very little resistance and could hardly be detected. Because of this, the silent punch was also called the assassination technique. As Chris's fist grazed Nozade's head, the residual power caused his hair to flutter. Even though it was only at the very last moment, Nozade still managed to dodge Chris' attack. Nozade once again stopped his attack and smirked. "That's how it should be. Senior, please show your prowess to the best of your abilities. Only then can I feel a sense of accomplishment of defeating you." Nozade once again stopped attacking and resumed his defenses. Once Nozade returned to his defensive state, even Chris' silent punches were easily parried or blocked. Whenever he takes my attack, an abnormal twist would appear on the black patterns outside his body. Chris silently counted, took another deep breath, and struck at Nozade's head. The black patterns on Nozade's face twisted a bit, allowing him to quickly take distance and face another punch. Nozade wasn't nearly as smug as he appeared. In fact, he was very worried right now. Although Chris currently appeared to be powerless against him and was completely overpowered, he was actually strong without boundaries. Each time that Nozade thought he would be able to attack and end this battle, his opponent would easily dodge it. He could clearly feel that he wasn't able to grasp his opponent's weakness. If this goes on, I'll be at a severe disadvantage. That thought appeared in Nozade's mind as he caught another of Chris' attacks. Just a bit more, and then I'll be able to take control of this fist technique as well. With Lord Negary's blessing, I would definitely be the ultimate winner. Nozade reaffirmed his faith. 5 years ago, he was only the second son of an aristocrat in the Roy's kingdom. Unable to inherit his family's peerage, he only had the choice of becoming his brother's butler or follow a scholar and become his apprentice. At that time, he could already imagine the boring life he would lead, until the author Sakri published a book that told the tales of Chris Modo. Encouraged by those tales, he decided to lead the adventurer's life, leaving that impersonal family. He traveled across the Roy's kingdom and trained himself to be stronger. Unfortunately, he couldn't change the fact that he was still only the second son of an aristocrat. If he didn't have a bit of wits to him, he wouldn't even have been able to reach Rheostromia. The Rheostromia of 5 years ago wasn't quite as prosperous as it was today. In fact, the Kent people still sent troops to disturb the town's peace from time to time. When he arrived at this place, the Crowmen still hadn't been officially established. Only its predecessor, the Rhea village guards, existed. He wasn't particularly strong or had the money to buy any weapons at the time. The only thing he could do was barely survive in Rhea. On a bad day, it wouldn't be strange if he had gotten sick and died or starved to death. The life of an adventurer wasn't quite the life in his dreams. During a job he took as an escort for a merchant cargo, the cargo was ambushed by the Kent people. When he tried to retaliate, he was brutally beaten down by a barrage of fists and kicks, similar to what was currently happening. He silently endured the pain and took the opportunity when a Kent person was careless to bite off his throat. It was due to this savage nature that after he was saved by the village guards, the leader of the village guards at the time, Captain Yadley, invited him to join the newly recruiting Crowman organization. Back then, he endured the Kent people's punches and kicks in order to retaliate, and he was now also enduring Chris attacks to do the same. Recalling when he became a Crowman and had to choose the method of implantation, due to knowing his strengths and weaknesses, Nozade implanted the blessings of Lord Negary on different parts of his body. The substance that was called Black Crow had now formed a symbiotic relationship with his body, not only allowing his physical prowess to go past the limit of humans, it even gave him a type of unique power. The Black Crow germs were actually extremely fragile, enough so that any outside stimulus could kill it. Each time that Chris attacked, a portion of Black Crow germs would immediately die, causing a sting that alerted Nozade of where the attack would hit. At the same time, his opponent's attack method would be learnt by the Black Crow germs all over his body. Once they learn enough, Nozade would then be able to imitate the attack pattern. Against these kinds of enemies, Nozade was practically invincible. He could then take the time to learn his enemy's attack, greatly affecting their mentality. As long as he was able to capitalize on their mistakes right at that moment, he would easily be able to defeat his enemy. I can feel it, according to what the Black Crow germs learned. This is how you use that attack. Noseades avoided another of Chris' attacks and threw a punch exactly as the Black Crow germs recorded. With Noseades' superhuman constitution and the perfectly harmonizing characteristic of the silent punch, even though Chris had harmonized with the environment and noticed the attack, his body wasn't able to keep up with his mind. Beta, just like this. As long as I hit him once, even if he's the legendary adventurer, he's still only human. Even if he doesn't die, he will lose his ability to fight back. Noseades was no longer able to maintain his calm. After all, this attack would determine whether or not he was able to win against his idol. An expression of triumph appeared on Noseades' face, but quickly disappeared. Noseades suddenly sensed his heart skipping a beat and a sense of inconsistency inside his body, causing his fist to graze Chris' face before he collapsed. This is... Noseades coughed up blood with an expression of absolute disbelief. He couldn't even tell if there was an attack at all. In that moment, he abruptly lost control of his entire body, and when he regained his senses, he had already lost. Chris ignored Noseades and continued to walk forward. Negary was still recovering. He had no more time to lose. It's the breathing. Noseades struggled to stand up, but once again slipped and fell to the ground. That inconsistency was breathing, wasn't it? Noseades recalled Chris' attacks from before. There were several times that he took a deep breath right before attacking. It was only right before he attacked that Chris breathed out instead. That breath triggered something inside his body and caused him to immediately lose the ability to fight. Just stay still. Your inner organs have been damaged by my attacks. If you keep struggling, you're going to cripple yourself, or possibly even die. Chris said without turning around and continued to walk forward. He didn't hate this Noseades, but he wasn't about to reveal the secret of his own technique. This battle isn't over. Noseades endured the pain and leapt forward, catching Chris' right thigh. The black patterns on his body all gathered at his face as he tried to take a bite at Chris' right leg. This guy, rhythm metal. Chris took a deep breath and regulated the rhythm on his leg to harmonize with metal. This technique allowed him to increase his defenses for a short period of time at the price of causing his rhythm to desynchronize itself. My deep rhythm has already damaged his organs. Even a completely healthy person wouldn't be able to move due to the pain. Chris was shocked by Noseades' mad actions. What kind of hex did Negary put on you that you'd be willing to sacrifice so much for him? Chris' deep rhythm was a high-leveled application of respiratory art. Every living being had their own rhythm. Any problems with the body would manifest as disturbances in their rhythm, and any disturbance in a person's rhythm would similarly manifest on their bodies. Chris' deep rhythm was the act of implanting a certain rhythm into an opponent's body through his breathing, then using the same breathing to trigger the implanted rhythm, instantly throwing his opponent's rhythm into chaos and causing their body to become unstable. The inner organs of every life form was intricate and delicate, so because of the disturbance in his rhythm, Noseades' attack affected his own inner organs before anything else. The wyvern that Chris killed years ago was also the same. A wyvern's body was far superior to that of a human. Together with a layer of dragon scales, most human weapons weren't able to cause them any damage. They were hailed as creatures that humans could not defeat, but Chris managed to use deep rhythm to make the wyvern kill itself. Considering the force behind Noseades' attack at the time, his inner organs should have been completely ruptured. He shouldn't be able to fight anymore. Chris couldn't understand Noseades' current actions. Noseades was in a frenzy, but still rational. When the black patterns gathered near his mouth, Chris could already tell what he was trying to do. To Noseades, these things were a blessing, but to Chris, they were poison. The fact that his body could even hold up right now is a miracle. If he injects those black patterns that give him his superhuman power into my body, he would die without a doubt. And he knows that as Chris saw Noseades' abnormally clear eyes, he felt it even more unimaginable. Negary, this evil spirit, what kind of hex did he actually use? Chris used a metal rhythm to forcefully increase his own defense, so Noseades' tattered body couldn't damage him. Even so, Noseades didn't give up and was still risking the last of his strength. Noseades' eyes were full of determination. He understood the results of his current actions, but he wasn't afraid. Lord Negary's power was supporting him. Nozade's life up to now flashed before his eyes. He was among the first to receive Lord Negary's blessing and become a crowman. At the time, he was still unclear about most things, but from the years before, he had already understood the limits of his talents. He was clever. He was also a bit wild. Among his own clique of people, he might even be considered excellent. But it was precisely because of that he understood his shortcomings. He could clearly see the limit that he would never be able to break through. It wasn't just him. The others were the same, including the heroic, the legendary adventurer Chris, who was his idol, was the same. Everyone had their limits. Nozades believed this, so he felt powerless and puzzled. It was only after he met the Great One, only after he understood the greatness of Lord Negary, that he finally found the lighthouse of his life. You chose to implant the black crow all over your body. What an interesting way of thinking. These are the words of Lord Negary at the time. You understand your own limits and restrictions well. That is praiseworthy. I need this uniqueness of yours. Only by knowing your own limits can you break that limit and become even stronger. Are you willing to become one of my uniqueness? Being offered the outstretched hand of Negary, Nozades couldn't refuse. If he couldn't break through his own limit, then he would follow an existence that could. He would become a part of that existence. The current Lord Negary might not be able to, however. Nozades showed one last smile. But surely one day, Lord Negary will break through the limit of humans. No, he will break through even higher limits than that and truly become the perfect existence. An epsilon. The others surely think the same. Lord Negary, he isn't just the leader that we follow, he is also the ideal to which we all strive to and the greatness to which we dedicate our everything. That's why, Lord Negary, whether it's my soul, whether it's my emotions, whether it's my uniqueness, if they're useful to you, please take it all. You'll surely step onto the highest throne, and we volunteer to become the steps under your feet. Nozades expended the rest of his strength that couldn't change anything and let death overcome his body. Nozades' life, rhythm, gradually disappeared. A will can accomplish many things, but it is not omnipotent. At least, no matter how strong a human's will was, it was impossible for them to change objective rules. But his will greatly shocked Chris, causing him to feel puzzled. Puzzled about Nozades and puzzled about Negary. You must be very confused, a voice called out. A crowman who wore a black robe jumped down from the top of a building, landing not too far away from Chris. If he didn't do what he did, Nozades, who was defeated by you, would have had his belief waver. He would have lost the right to even become a step on his stair. That would truly be unforgivable for a crowman, and I would have done the same. A step. Are you also here to block my path? Chris took a deep breath, fully prepared for another battle. From the other party's figure under the robe, he could tell that this crowman was a woman. Women had different weaknesses compared to men, and this information was crucial in a battle. You could say so, but before that, I have something else I must do. The crowman pulled down her hood to reveal a plain female face. She raised her right hand to show a small bottle with a writhing black liquid substance inside, offering it to Chris. I, Tisa of the Crowman, on behalf of Lord Negary, hereby extend an offer to Mr. Chris. The crowman spoke solemnly. Would Mr. Chris be willing to become a part of the crowman? You shouldn't refuse right away. Mr. Chris, Tisa grinned. You understand the state of your body better than anyone else. If you become a crowman and receive Lord Negary's blessing, he can heal the hidden wounds on your body. If not, Mr. Chris would probably not live for too many more years. I think you don't need to say anything else. Just like how you bunch have your beliefs. I have things I won't give up on. Chris refused Tisa's invitation without hesitation. Of course, he knew the current state of his body. An adventurer's life was even worse than one initially expected. Even though he achieved and gained many things during his travels, they also left countless marks on his body. If he didn't have respiratory art to help him heal, the long years of adventuring would have already ruined his body. He was indeed the legendary adventurer. But even the legendary adventurer was only human, and humans die. Chris already had the conviction to give up his life at any time since long ago, just like the man back then. I was breathing white smoke. You wouldn't believe just how much despair a mountain of nothing but white snow can give a man. If Chris wasn't with me, I think would have already gone mad. Maybe I already am for helping Chris lure away the pursuing soldiers. Chris seemed very calm. He told me that my breathing was becoming chaotic from fear, and my life's rhythm was the same. I needed to calm my breathing in order to keep on living. Respiratory art is so amazing. He actually managed to calm me down. Chris admitted to me that he wasn't sure if he was going to live through this one. He told me to be ready. Are you ready to risk your life? Snow Mountain Journey was a novel written by Sakri in his own perspective, retelling the story of Sakri, who was still a nameless bard at the time, running into the legendary adventurer Chris. Chris was on a mission to escort the eldest son of a duke back to his country to inherit his peerage. Perhaps attracted to Chris' personal charms, Sakri chose to follow along. On the way, in order to lure the pursuing soldiers away, they separated from the duke's eldest son and wandered together on a large snowy mountain. It was also during that time that Chris told Sakri about his exploits. After coming out triumphant against the pursuing soldiers and finishing Chris' mission, Sakri compiled the stories that Chris told him into a book, publishing and spreading his name across the continent as the legendary adventurer. The Snow Mountain Journey story was also the last chapter of the book, as well as the most exciting one. During that Snow Mountain battle, Chris' face was scarred and Sakri was hurt quite badly, so not long after he published his book, Sakri passed away from disease. All of Chris' tales from then on were stories made by exaggerating witness retelling. Although most of them followed the general vein of the story, there were quite a few falsified details. Chris mumbled his own name nostalgically, then glared back at Tisa with a determined expression. I've already wasted a lot of time here. Please get out of my way, Miss Tisa. Even if you're a lady, if you stand in my way, I won't hold back for the sake of my beliefs. Tisa smiled. Her originally plain face suddenly felt a bit more charming. I'm not nose-aids, and I won't hold back is my line. I'll ask you one more time. Mr. Chris, Tisa pulled out a ceremonial sword from under her robe. A large black pattern appeared on her hand, showing where she was implanted with the black crow germs. You have qualities that Lord Negary needs. Surrender yourself to Lord Negary. That way, not only will your wounds be healed, you will even be granted power by Lord Negary. Chris' expression didn't change as he threw a punch at the woman in front of him without hesitation. What hateful bugs! Yadley pulled his hand out of a corpse as a black substance gradually went back inside his body through his wrist. This dead body, like the rest of them, had a blank look on its face as if they hadn't even realized that they were dead. This group of people set up an ambush near Isabella's home, waiting to kill her and Nala as they returned. Unfortunately, because the crowmen existed, not only did they not manage to accomplish their goal, they even lost their lives in the process. Both Isabella and her daughter were clueless to the ambush that was supposed to happen. They came back home with complicated expressions on their faces as normal. The black crow germs were a kind of wonderful virus. Increasing a person's constitution was only their most basic ability. Before being implanted, they were no different from each other, but after implantation is completed, different abilities would manifest according to the difference between who and where they were implanted. Like how Noseade's implants gave him his ability to sense and copy an opponent's ability, Yadley, the literal first crowman, also manifested an ability of his own. He was the one who managed to explore the black crow germs the most among the crowmen, one of the strongest among all of Negary's subordinates. Captain Yadley, a merchant-looking person, walked in front of Yadley. His skin was constantly morphing and turning into a black hue before finally becoming a mud-like substance, then settled as a plain face without any notable features. What's the news, Garnan? Yadley asked. Garnan was also one of the crowmen. Like Noseades, he implanted the black crow germs all over his skin, but how he used them in battle was different from Noseades. He had the black crow germs completely devour his skin, giving him the ability to shape-shift into any disguise. Because of this, he's normally disguised as someone else to collect intel in various locations. The latest reports stated that Cardinal Augustine of the Church of Divine Grace was spotted not too far away from Rhea with a squad of warriors of divine grace. Garnon's voice was also featureless, like his appearance, unobtrusive. With gravy, yes. Reinforcements. Yadley nodded, gesturing that he understood. Additionally, there is one other unconfirmed report. Garnan hesitated for a bit before continuing. I got a tip from a Roya's merchant that the Roya's kingdom might have sent some people to Rhea. So the Roya's kingdom wants to join in on the fun as well. Yadley frowned, feeling things becoming more complicated. I got it. Continue to collect more information. Pay attention to safety. Understood. Garnon's skin twisted and turned black again before transforming into a young man with a naive look on his face. Once he changed his outfit, he would have turned into a rookie mercenary who just left home. Lord Negary, Yadley whispered as he looked at Garnan walking away, then turned to the direction of the Forbidden Zone. Over 1/3 of his body now consisted of the Black Crow germs, so he was able to sense some of Lord Negary's changes through the viral connection. Yadley. An exhausted-sounding voice was transmitted to Yadley through his Black Crow germs, causing him to immediately kneel down on one knee and deeply lower his head. Then he respectfully answered, I'm here, Lord Negary. How can I serve you? I will need to hibernate for a short while. During this time, Noah will be by my side to protect me, so he won't be able to leave. You will be responsible for keeping Rhea's order. Don't let anyone disturb me. Additionally, Nosades was defeated by Chris. Tisa is going to lose as well very soon. I will tell you the method of controlling the bizarre scales. Have them intercept Chris and kill him if possible. If it seems too difficult, you don't need to force it. The most important thing, for now, is to make sure my dormant period passes smoothly. Understood, Lord Negary. You seem puzzled under the shade of the great tree. Bones of various creatures could be seen littered everywhere. These were the bones of the crow's food, as well as his own over the years. Some of them were even human remains, and Negary was sitting on top of a pile of bones made to look like a throne. Indeed, this subordinate does not understand my lord's actions, Noah replied with a serious voice. Before this, Noah would have never done this. The previous Noah would have only followed Negary's orders to the letter, but now he was expressing his doubt. My lord doesn't have a dormant period at all. Even though my lord's soul was temporarily shattered, with my support my lord should recover very quickly. It seems after becoming one with me, you're one step closer to release. Negary sat on top of his throne of bones, his right index finger pressed against his temple while leaning on it. Several dozen crows flew in from afar, dropping a corpse down in front of Negary. Nosades called out the corpse's name. Negary's left hand lifted slightly and summoned the Black Crow germs from inside the corpse, slowly absorbing it back into Negary's body. The great tree behind him abruptly went from intense stillness to intense movement as hundreds, thousands of crows took flight from the tree and swooped down on Nosade's body, leaving behind a new skeleton in just a few seconds. The black flood returned to the tree, returning everything to absolute silence like before. Negary's finger once again moved slightly and controlled the skull of the skeleton with his interference force, calling it into his hand. After contemplating for a short while, he chose a spot on the stairs leading up his throne and placed it down. Negary leaned back on his throne and rested his head on top of his right index finger again. But this time he used a bit too much force and caused his finger to pierce through his head, releasing a thin strand of life essence that quickly dissipated. As Negary pulled his finger out from his head, tiny writhing black tentacles quickly connected and closed the wound on his temple before a white mucus seeped out, which quickly dried up and reformed his pale white skin. It seems that this body is still quite flawed. Negary wasn't dejected or regretful. Flaws were necessary, and all he needed to do was think of how to make up for these flaws bit by bit. This body was also one of Negary's experimental results. Through the combination of several dozen different germs and life essence, a powerful viral body was created. This body's physical strength was unmatched. Not even the Crowman could be compared to it. Other than that, it also had various abilities. For example, His fingernails were created from a type of unique germs that like to devour metal. When bunched together, the germs became as hard and sharp as the blade of a sword. The layer of white-skinned germs outside of his body also had the ability to form a layer of interference. According to Noah's tests, his spiritual sense couldn't sense Negary, who was covered within the layer of interference. On the other hand, while Negary's soul was inside, his interference force would not be restricted at all. His control over the flock of crows also wouldn't weaken. And even more importantly, this layer of skin made it so that his consumption of life essence became minimal. Even if sunlight shone directly onto him, he wouldn't consume more life essence compared to normal. This was the layer of protection created to protect Negary's soul. Unfortunately, it was still incomplete. His control over the body strength wasn't perfect, so occasionally he would accidentally hurt himself like what was seen just now. Perhaps that would change after he obtained the respiratory art. Noseades managed to scout quite a few of Chris' techniques after absorbing Noseades' Black Crow germs, Negary commented. Originally, Negary could only absorb a living creature's life essence and soul essence right after their deaths, but the Black Crow germs managed to make up for this problem for those implanted with it. After a crowman dies, their scattered soul essence and life essence would be absorbed by the Black Crow germs. Negary could then collect and slowly absorb this life essence and soul essence. Noah, what do you think Chris will do if they know that I am currently in a dormant period? Negary asked Noah. His job is no longer to simply save Isabella and her daughter. He would also want to defeat me, if possible. And when he found that it was impossible by himself, he would naturally seek out reinforcements. Negary didn't wait for Noah to reply and answer by himself. This reinforcement could come from the warriors and priests from the Church of Divine Grace. They could also be the military force of the Intercam Kingdom, or the Roy's Kingdom spies, or any of the other forces here, yes. During the development of Reastromia, we have accepted too many outside forces, causing quite a few things in Rhea to slowly leave our control. Even with the diffused germs, there are still forces that have yet to come to light. And so this is a chance to remove the unnecessary forces from Rhea, a chance to extend our range of influence. At the same time, these disorderly forces need a chance, and I'm giving them that chance, together with an illusion that they would need to join together in order to eliminate me. Chris is a talented man. He would fit perfectly as the leader of this temporary joint operation, Negary slowly explained. So, the reason my lord entrusted the bizarre scales to Yadley was to give them pressure. Is my lord not afraid that Chris would be killed by the bizarre scales? Noah understood Negary's intentions and expressed his worry for Chris. If he can't survive, then he simply doesn't have what it takes to become the leader of the joint operation. If he dies, then he dies, Negary said without a care. Tisa and Chris' fight had brought them to another street entirely, and Chris couldn't help but admit that this woman was tough. Her rapier was incredibly accurate, coupled with her inhuman speed, made it so that Chris had to focus almost entirely on avoiding her attacks. Even so, he was still wounded all over his body, with wounds that constantly bled. Ha ha ha. Tisa was breathing heavily, as expected of the legendary adventurer. Thanks to his respiratory art, his strength was extremely well balanced. Even when she had relied on her superior physical prowess and the advantage of having a weapon to press on the attack, she only managed to deal minor wounds to him. If this goes on, she might actually lose. I definitely won't let that happen. Tisa stopped pressing her attack, bit and ripped the back of her right hand without hesitation to let her blood and the tar-like Black Crow germs flow down along her rapier. Each and every one of you, what terrifying charms he has, that Negary. Chris sighed. Just a few seconds ago, Negary's faint ominous rhythm had disappeared, as if it was hidden away. This caused Chris to know that he couldn't keep letting this drag on, otherwise he would miss the best chance to defeat Negary. But I won't be able to do it by myself. Chris glanced at his opponent, Tisa, and couldn't help but have such a thought. If all of Negary's subordinates were as powerful as the ones he had met, it was unimaginable how powerful Negary himself was. Looks like I'll need some reinforcements. Daughters are useless, especially when they're not even beautiful. This was said by the one she called father, a statement that left a deep impression in the mind of the young Tisa. She was the result of a one-night stand between her merchant father and her powerless civilian mother. After a natural disaster occurred, her mother had no choice but to bring her 6-year-old self and seek out her father, who wanted nothing more than to climb the ranks of society. In the end, her mother had to become a lowly worker in his merchant caravan in order to stay. Her father was barely interested in keeping them there. He had the same indifference that most merchants had. They only focused on whether or not they could earn profit. Even if it was a woman with whom he shared a night of pleasure, even if she carried his blood-related daughter, he only gave them affection when they could bring him certain benefits. Tisa grew up in her father's merchant caravan. No matter how hard her mother worked for them, all she ever received were sneers and ridicule. Even if Tisa was angry, she understood the fact that women were only men's dependents in this world. Those without sufficient strength would never be recognized by others. She then did her best to study and learn what she could, gradually becoming an important figure in the merchant caravan. Even those who used to sneer and look down at her called her young lady. Perhaps she inherited her father's traits, or perhaps because of her own experiences when she was little, Tisa didn't know when to stop. Every moment of every day, she would either be actively working to improve herself or looking for an opportunity to do so. She saved up money and hired an old mercenary to teach her swordsmanship. But during the very first day, that old mercenary mercilessly showed her that a woman's strength was naturally inferior to that of men. Because of that, no matter how much effort she put into this, she would not achieve much in the end. The change to all of this was when the caravan arrived in Rheostromia. Seeing her chance, she left the caravan without hesitation and chose to become a crowman. This was how she was, a person that took every opportunity she could. Comoros is dead. The forces in Rhea will soon change. At this juncture, only by showing one's talent and contributing greatly would there be a chance to rise even further. Being a crowman is definitely not the end of my journey. Tisa glanced at her rapier, now soaked in blood and black crow germs, took a stance and stared closely at her opponent, Chris. When she became a crowman, she chose to implant the black crow germs into her hands. This made it so that her grip was strong and stable, raising her swordsmanship to an incredible level. The old mercenary who predicted that she would not achieve much was now unable to receive even a single one of her strikes. Defeating you will be my opportunity to rise, and I will take that opportunity no matter what. Tisa brandished a rapier and stabbed straight at Chris' nose and mouth with lightning-fast speed and precision. Chris, your strength comes from your respiratory art, and thus so will your downfall. That sword is soaked with that black substance. It would definitely not end well if I were to be struck with that sword. Chris sensed his surrounding rhythm and quickly avoided Tisa's frenzied barrage of stabs. Right at this moment, metal rhythm. Chris took a deep breath and closed the pores on his hands that even gleamed almost like metal. He clamped the rapier with great accuracy and broke it with both hands. He then shifted his body and moved in closer to Tisa, throwing a punch at her without hesitation. Seized the opportunity, Tisa completely ignored Chris' incoming punch as her throat moved and spat out a mouthful of mixed blood and black crow germs straight at Chris' face. Tisa received the punch head-on with her face and was sent flying backwards. Several bloody, detached teeth could be seen falling on the ground quite clearly. Meanwhile, the black germs that she spat out moved like living creatures, tried to invade Chris' mouth and nose, making it so that he couldn't help but stop this respiratory art. The sense of power from harmonization with the world through rhythm also stopped. She purposefully let the blood onto her rapier, not to make her sword more powerful, but so draw my attention to it. She then unleashed that barrage of stabs towards my face to force me to focus completely on her sword and not see her holding a mouthful of the black substance. It with diuresis new ES. Chris was a bit flustered as he tried to peel off the black substance, climbing into his mouth and nose. Without the heightened senses brought by the respiratory art, He was feeling very awkward, similar to a person who is used to seeing with their eyes being suddenly blindfolded. Tisa struggled to stand up. Her face was swollen and made it so that her plain features now appeared laughable. But she didn't care, as seizing an opportunity naturally came with its costs and risks. She only implanted the black crow germs into her hands, but her overall constitution was also improved. Otherwise, taking one of Chris' punches head-on would have caused her to fall unconscious. A 1. Tisa didn't attempt to go in for the kill. Chris' respiratory art, being rendered useless by the black crow germs, was nothing but a small victory. Being an illegitimate daughter in a merchant caravan made it so that she had to constantly be careful of everything, otherwise she could die during the long trips at any time. Right now, Chris' respiratory art should be useless, but he might have other aces up his sleeves, so there was no need for her to recklessly charge in. Men, finish Chris off. I will appeal to Lord Negary for whoever kills him to be granted the qualifications to become a crowman, Tisa loudly shouted in a leaky voice. After a few moments of silence, several people appeared out of nowhere with weapons in their hands and approached Chris. Black crow germs that were suitable to be implanted into a person's body weren't easy to create, so there had always been very few quotas to join the crowmen. These people had been watching the crowmen and Chris fight, so they saw how powerful both of them were. It was unlikely for them to obtain the respiratory art from Chris, and it also required talent as well as meticulous training, so becoming a crowman was a much more enticing offer. Due to being unable to breathe, Chris' vision was becoming blurry. He could only see faint figures that approached him out of ill will. 10 years ago, within the snow mountain, those pursuers also approached him with similar ill will. At the time, due to the snowstorm, all he could see were blurred figures as well. I'm no longer the same confused man who needs to be saved as before. Chris resolutely closed his eyes, recalling the words of the great man who taught him respiratory art. In a desperate situation, you will face the interference of fear, and the greatest strength of humans is nothing but the ability to face fear and desperation with calmness. Only by being calm can you find the way to escape from desperation. Recalling how Tisa bit and ripped the back of her hand, and how the black substance moved from before, Chris stopped putting strength into his hands. Apparently realizing something, he quickly crouched down and hit his head against the ground with considerable force. What are you begging for your life now? One of the goons swung the axe in their hands, excitedly looking down at Chris. So much for the legendary adventurer. In the face of death, you're just as pathetic as the rest. Whatever, the crowman quota will be mine. The axe goon charged forward first and swung his axe down at Chris. Foe. The axe-wielding goon didn't notice the sound of breathing as he attacked. Chris crouched down, shoved both hands accurately between the goon's running legs, and rolled to avoid the swinging axe. As Chris looked up, a wound was clearly seen on his forehead where blood was dripping down. The black crow germs began to move gradually towards the wound and let Chris open his mouth. Sorry about this. Stripping rhythm. Chris clutched the mass of black crow germs on his face and began to use an advanced application of the respiratory art. All things in the world had their own rhythm. Harmonizing with that rhythm allowed one to sense them or even use their power, for example, metal rhythm. At the same time, if one's rhythm completely rejected the rhythm of another thing, one would be able to expel it from their body. It was this trick that Chris used to expel the germs he inhaled while staying in Rheostromia. The blood on Chris' face trembled a bit before he peeled all the mass of black substance off himself and threw it onto the axe-wielding goon. These germs aren't sentient. They only know to act on their instincts to try and enter a person's body or to follow fresh blood. You were probably holding a mouthful of blood to make sure that the germs didn't flow down your throat, didn't you, woman? Chris continued to breathe and used stripping rhythm to expel the germs that managed to enter his body, while the axe-wielding goon was now rolling on the ground as the black mass invaded his body through his mouth and nose. He screamed and writhed in pain as black spots appeared all over his body. In just a few moments, he would probably die from the black crow disease. You don't become a crowman through simply contracting the black crow germs, otherwise there would be no need for a restriction with quotas. Should I say as expected of a legendary adventurer? Being able to notice the black crow germ's characteristics despite being in such a situation, Tisa slowly raised her broken rapier again. While she chose to be careful and had other people finish Chris off, she would not flee should the situation turn bad as it currently had. Just as she said, if she was in Nozade's shoes, she would have chosen to do exactly as he did. Become a part of Lord Negary and follow him to the very top. Throw my life away in battle to qualify to become a step on his path. Tisa saw the vision of Negary offering her his hand as she determined herself. Every person wanted to feel needed and gain the recognition of others. The entire reason why Tisa worked herself so hard in the first place was so that she would not be considered useless anymore. Does none of you cherish your own life? Under Chris' glare, the goons that surrounded him fearfully retreated and ran back into hiding. As he steadily approached Tisa again, there was a look of respect in his eyes. Regardless if they were an enemy or not, regardless of what kind of faith they hold, you simply could not look down on a person who knew exactly what they wanted and holds on firmly to their belief to the point of throwing their life away for it. In fact, Chris felt that he should praise their faith. Enough, Tisa! A voice came from afar, calling Tisa to back down. Standing on top of a building with the crowman uniform, it was Yadley who spoke with a serious tone. Reyes still needs people. For Lord Negary's sake, leave your useful self alive. I understand. Tisa glared intensely at her opponent Chris, lowered her broken rapier, and quickly retreated. Another enemy. Chris continued to breathe to adjust himself. After 2 consecutive battles, he had expended quite a bit of stamina, and this new enemy, from their rhythm alone, seemed to be a lot stronger than the rest. How difficult. My body is getting worse and worse by the years. Chris squinted his eyes. Respiratory art was a wonderful thing. By practicing it alone, one would be able to adjust their own rhythm, thus improving one's health and lifespan. But as Chris was constantly going on his adventures, constantly using various respiratory art techniques to fight, his body was instead becoming worse. For example, metal rhythm forcefully adjusted his body to match that of metal, thus throwing his own rhythm into chaos and causing a tiny bit of imbalance within himself. As this imbalance accumulated, it would grow to become a hidden internal wound that when erupted would immediately take Chris' life. Kill me. Somebody, please kill me. The axe-wielding goon from before was screaming like mad. After contracting the Black Crow disease, his entire body was writhing and squeezing itself, causing him extreme, unbearable pain. To him, death was a kind of release. He staggered towards Chris, who was standing closest to him, forcing Chris to split part of his focus to pay attention to him. You've caused enough disturbance here. Time for you to rest, Chris Moto. Yadley didn't pay any attention to the axe-wielding goon. His eyes became sharp as he ordered with a strange tone, "Bizarre Scales, kill him." A dark golden glow flashed briefly and vanished as the axe-wielding goon's body was instantly ripped apart. The golden glow followed the splashing blood right in front of Chris as a set of razor-sharp claws came down on him. But for some reason, the creature's movements hesitated for a brief moment. The smell of blood filled the air as Chris dodged to one side. A long wound appeared on his right hip. If it were just a bit deeper, it would have punctured his organs. If that thing earlier had attacked him directly without the axe-wielding goon in its way, and without that slight hesitation, his body would have been ripped cleanly in half. Thank you. The axe-wielding goon's body was ripped in half at his stomach, collapsing to the ground with an expression of release before dying. What sort of animal is that? In Chris' panic, he only managed to see some dark gold scales. And what is that extreme imbalanced rhythm? It reminds me of Rhea's chief, Comoros. No, that thing's rhythm is even more imbalanced than Comoros. Again, Yadley's cold and strange tone ordered again, causing Chris to hurriedly jump away. He was most afraid of enemies whose speed or strength far surpassed his own, as it would be hard for the various applications of respiratory art to be used. Nigerian Irabi. Chris quickly jumped into a narrow alleyway. The main road was too wide to provide him any protection from this sort of speedy enemy. Only the complicated paths of the alleyway would give him a chance to restrain that creature and win. There was another thing. Why did that creature hesitate briefly before attacking me? Do I have something that's affecting its actions? Chris' mind was turning desperately. With another flash of the dark golden glow, Chris managed to grab a ledge above just in time to avoid this attack. Continue. Bizarre scales. Chris was sticking to the wall like a gecko. Since stripping rhythm worked on the principle that things with unharmonious rhythms were repelled, a perfectly harmonious rhythm could naturally create suction. As expected, I have something that's affecting the so-called bizarre scales and causing it to be just a little bit hesitant as it attacks. Chris climbed up the wall and onto the roof of the building. The bizarre scales rhythm is full of madness and chaos. A creature with this kind of rhythm should be no more than an irrational beast. So how is that crowman controlling it? Chris swiftly rolled to one side. A thin, tiny black string flashed into existence for a brief second and disappeared. Chris continued to use his breathing to sense his surroundings. He was basically walking on a tightrope right now, so one wrong step for him could mean death. With a dark golden flash, the bizarre scales jumped out from some corner and destroyed the roof of the building where Chris was standing. The bizarre scale's body was now in the air, its movements slowed enough by the impact for Chris to see its face. The creature was mostly humanoid with dark golden scales of mixed colors all over its body, a thin membrane underneath its armpits, and a long barbed tail behind it. The only way to describe the look on its face was madness. Sharp, jagged, and uneven teeth protruded from its mouth while drool dripped down. As soon as the bizarre scales landed, its body disappeared in a dark golden flash. That was Dragon Scales, sensing the incredibly imbalanced rhythm, impatience and madness he felt from the creature. Chris couldn't help but recall one of his adventures. While it wasn't exactly the same as the wyvern he defeated with deep rhythm, the imbalanced rhythm and dark golden scales of the creature could be faintly recognized as Dragon Scales. Dragon. Damn it. So that's the reason why Negary wanted to keep Nala here. Chris was immediately able to explain a lot of things. From a very long time ago, Negary had already discovered that Nala was the daughter of dragons, and he's been keeping Isabella and her daughter Rhea for all these years in order to study the secret of the dragon's blood. By now, Negary's experiments must have yielded results, and the bizarre scales are part of that. Chris wasn't wrong. The bizarre scales were indeed a product of Negary's experiments to create the soul's blood. The Koshi mixed-blooded people before Comoros accepted the injection of the dragon's blood, but their souls couldn't endure the dragon's pressure inside the blood. Not only did these people lose their minds and become senseless animals, but their bodies also mutated due to the influence of the dragon's blood. These monsters were both ferocious and mindless. If Negary hadn't found a way to restrain them, they would have already been discarded as failed specimens. Which means the item that was able to affect these bizarre scales was... Chris glanced down at a piece of ivory hanging on his clothes, the fong of the ferocious wyvern. If the bizarre scales hadn't been affected by the wyvern fong and hesitated slightly each time it attacked, Chris would have already been killed by this beast with strength and speed that vastly overwhelmed his own. I don't know how many of these bizarre scales there are, but Negary's accumulated power is definitely terrifying. This ominous evil spirit must be destroyed. Chris' mind turned and swiftly took the wyvern fong into his hand. Regardless, I have to make it through the current danger first. With the wyvern fong, I will at least have a bit of protection against the bizarre scales, so the most dangerous factor right now is the crowman who is controlling the bizarre scales. Chris remembered the thin black string that appeared for a split second before it vanished. Kill him, bizarre scales. Yadley's voice came again. Chris was feeling a sense of danger unlike ever before. The dark golden bizarre scales turned into a streak of light as it charged towards him. Chris waved the wyvern fong in his hand to make the bizarre scales flinch briefly and hurriedly avoided it. But a split second later, he completely froze in place as he noticed countless black strings that had completely sealed off his escape routes, waiting for Chris to throw himself into the net. Boom! Surrounded by smoke and dust, The bizarre scales directly smashed into the road where Chris had been standing and made a huge crater. The black strings stretched across the ground and into the sky all over this area, constantly expanding outwards. If you try to look where these strings originated from, you'd find that they were all connected to Yadley's fingers. Over a third of his body had been replaced by black crow germs, and all 10 of his fingers were made entirely out of this substance. The germs here had been trained by him to form the shape of strings, easily piercing or cutting through the flesh of living beings as he ordered them to, at the same time sensitive enough to detect movement in the air around them. If these strings were to pierce through the skin, they would quickly spread all over the body and act like strings of a puppet for Yadley to control. Furthermore, Yadley still had black crow germs implanted at several other positions of his body. That was the reason why he was the strongest of the crowmen. No heartbeat did the bizarre scales kill him. Yadley used the strings at his fingertips to search the surroundings again. Since this was Lord Negary's direct order, he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Yes. Wait, the bizarre scale state isn't quite right. Yadley sensed the bizarre scale's step as it walked through one of his black strings and noticed that its movement was heavier than it was supposed to be. After the dust settled, Yadley quickly noticed a person laying flat on top of the bizarre scales, covered in fine powder. Who else could it be but Chris? At the very last second before the bizarre scales got to him, Chris used his rhythm to make the old wyvern fong explode into fine dust, took advantage of the wind to scatter it all over his body, and used respiratory art to make the powdered fong stick to him. As he was soaked in the aura of a dragon, the bizarre scales gave up on attacking him and instead made an opening big enough for Chris to climb onto it. Waiting for the creature to take a few more steps, Chris leapt onto another location and breathed out heavily. The bizarre scales body then shivered and collapsed completely, coughing up some golden blood as well as bits and pieces of ruptured organs. As soon as Chris landed on the bizarre scales, he had been using deep rhythm to attack it. Even a creature of the bizarre scales level couldn't handle its own power attacking itself and got its organs ruptured. Chris, I didn't expect you to be able to kill a bizarre scales. Yadley's expression was somber, but this is the end. To make sure that you don't disturb Lord Negary's hibernation, I will have you lay your life down right here. As soon as he said that, Yadley's expression changed and noticed that some sort of power had led him into saying that. Chris' expression widened, noticing the information Yadley had just conveyed. So Negary really was wounded and is currently staying somewhere to recover? No matter. Yadley suddenly laughed, for flashes of dark golden light appeared next to him and revealed themselves to be more bizarre scales. Each of them had a crowman riding on top, including Tisa, who had now re-equipped herself with a new rapier, all staring down coldly at Chris. Seeing the crowmen and bizarre scales surrounding him, Chris couldn't help but smile bitterly. He was powerless against such an overwhelming difference in power. After all, he was still only human. At this point, a clear voice was suddenly heard. It seems we arrived just in time. The one who arrived was wearing a white robe with simple patterns, a neutral middle-aged face with a bit of silver mixed among his blonde short hair. A man who could give anyone a good impression at first glance. Augustine, you're finally here, Chris sighed. This man was one of Chris' friends within the Church of Divine Grace, as well as the one who issued him this mission, a Divine Grace Cardinal, Augustine. There were 2 priests and 3 knights of Divine Grace armed with swords and full armor. Each of them had gone through rigorous knight training and granted a grace that allowed them to exert superhuman abilities. Church of Divine Grace, so you plan to shelter this criminal who killed Lord Comoros? Yadley coldly questioned. The crime was nothing but a one-sided claim by your side. No one really knows what really happened, so that's not going to convince the people. What do you think, Ross? Augustine smiled and answered without worry. Indeed, Captain Yadley, I also believe the same. A rich-looking middle-aged man stepped out with a bitter smile and some awkwardness. That would certainly cause us to feel quite insecure. Grosk, one of the many in Turkam kingdom merchants who frequented Rheostromia. Where there were people, there was power, and the merchants were no different. Regarding border trades alone, Grosk was the vague leader or representative of all Intercam merchants. These border merchants, or legitimate smugglers as one might call them, all had their own backings, among which were the aristocrats of the Intercam kingdom. After the previous series of political power struggles, the representatives of these merchants had no choice but to support the Church of Divine Grace and put pressure on those in charge of Rhea. We also believe that to be the case, another voice called out. A group of people wearing uniformed clothing came out from another side. From their distinct facial features, it was easy to tell that they were people from the Roya's kingdom. There was also a merchant-looking man behind them, who was the Roya's merchant's representative. They joined forces because we revealed quite a bit of our power, huh? Yadley scowled. This was the situation he didn't want to happen the most. In the vicinity of Rheastromia, Negary's forces were naturally the strongest, but when the representative forces of two countries joined together to go against Rhea, it was troublesome since they had the support of two countries. The most important thing is to hold out until my lord gets past his dormant period, not to mention what happened just now. Yadley recalled how he couldn't help himself saying those words just now and scoffed. We will naturally investigate the matter regarding Lord Comaro's death further on our side, but as the prime suspect, Chris's movements must be restrained until things come to light. No problem. Then let's stop fighting for now, Chris lightly nodded. The limits of Negary's strength was still unknown. Although he really wanted to take advantage of the so-called dormant period before it passed, it was hard to guarantee victory with their current forces. Then please stay inside this manor for now. If you leave without permission, you will be considered to have confessed guilty to the crime, and Rhea's enforcers will have the right to execute you on sight. Yadley put Chris on house arrest inside manor. It was not that he didn't want to put him directly into jail, but with the Church of Divine Grace and the Intercam merchants on his side, Yadley would find it hard to accomplish that. I truly hope your side will be able to capture the real culprits soon, Augustine said with a gentle smile as he stood on one side. May Lord Comaros rest in peace. A few moments later, one of the Knights of Divine Grace brought Isabella and her daughter to his manor. As the young knight looked at the main road from afar that quickly regained its prosperity, he seemed a bit puzzled. RAOES. Even in the Intercam Kingdom's capital, quite a few people died from diseases every day. Although the priests of Divine Grace had the grace of salvation that could cure the majority of diseases, the Church of Divine Grace itself only had so many priests who could use the grace, and each use drained them of their stamina and strength, so they couldn't afford to use their grace without restraint to heal those civilians. What caused the knight's interest to be piqued was that during his little trip around Rhea to pick up Isabella and her daughter, he found that most of the people here were at their top physical state, as if diseases didn't exist here at all. Meyerson, what are you thinking about? A voice called out to the young knight. As he turned to look, he saw that it was Augustine's disciple, Lwyn Donner. Lwyn, thank you for always coming with me to heal those poor folks. Meyerson sincerely offered his gratitude. He was born within the slums of the capital. Only when he was found to have the appropriate constitution to accept a grace was he brought outside. But even now he still remembered what happened at the time. A plague broke out in the royal capital that year, and the place that faced the worst afflictions were the slums. People died every day without being buried. Rotting corpses littered the streets. At the time, Meyerson was also afflicted with the plague. Only when a group of Divine Grace priests came into the slums to help alleviate the issue was Meyerson saved and discovered to have the potential to become a Knight of Divine Grace. Unfortunately, the grace suitable for him was a combat-oriented one, not the healing grace of salvation. After becoming a Knight of Divine Grace and earning enough for himself, whenever he had the time, Meyerson would return to the slums and help out those poor souls. Whenever he did, he would try to ask the priests with the grace of salvation to come with him and heal those in the slums, but the majority of them weren't willing to waste time for such things. Healing the aristocrats would at least earn them a large sum of money, while healing the poor people made it so that they had to enter the slums. The dirty, chaotic slums were filled with various stenches, random defecation, and even rotting bodies. How could the priests who exerted themselves as superior people be willing to go to such places? That is only my duty, The Lord's grace should not be limited to only nobles and merchants, Llewyn Donner smiled and replied. Unlike Meyerson, he was born in an aristocratic family and received higher education. He was also a devout believer in the Lord. With an ambitious and confident grin, he said, "Later on, if I ever become one of the upper echelons of the church, I will surely set up rules to include voluntary treatment as part of a priest's commitment." Compared to Meyerson, as he was born a noble, Llewyn seemed a bit more interested in power and authority, but Meyerson could tell that Llewyn truly wanted the grace of the Lord to reach everyone. "Then you're going to have to work even harder, Llewyn. I'll be waiting for that day," Meyerson said with complete sincerity. Due to his family's background and him being Cardinal Augustine's disciple, coupled with the fact that he showed excellent abilities, many people were optimistic that he would certainly become a high-ranking member of the Church of Divine Grace in the future. After parting ways with Llewyn, Meyerson felt a bit guilty for no reason. He glanced back at the prosperous streets in the distance and felt slightly at a loss. This is the blasphemous evil spirit that controls diseases. Negary? The rhythm I sensed through my respiratory art was correct. For unknown reasons, Negary had fallen weak and is currently hiding somewhere to recuperate himself, standing on the second floor of the manor. Chris said with conviction, "This is the best chance we'll have to eliminate Negary." "I understand. I also agree that we should eliminate Negary right now. Evil spirits are nothing but faithless undead and embodiments of evil. We would definitely not leave it to grow." Augustine stood by the window, looking down at the peacekeeping crowmen surrounding this manor, openly monitoring this place. His words caused Grosk to feel a bit embarrassed, as it was merchants like him who flocked to this place that allowed Rhea to become as powerful as it currently was. "And so the main issue is whether we should send Isabella away first or keep them with us." Augustine paused briefly before continuing. Hearing Augustine's words, Chris' gaze wandered towards the mother-daughter pair that was eating their meal on the ground floor. This question truly needed proper consideration. First of all, sending Isabella and her daughter away first meant reducing both their fighting force and their chances of winning against Negary. Secondly, eliminating Negary meant that Augustine must remain here, and without Cardinal Augustine as escort, considering Seth I's attitude so far, it would be quite unknown whether or not Isabella would actually make it back safely. But if they left Isabella and her daughter here, that would mean they were putting all their eggs into one basket. If they couldn't defeat Negary, the mother-daughter pair would also remain here without being able to return to Intercam. And most importantly, Rhea itself wasn't safe either. It wasn't just Seth I. The Roya's kingdom also didn't hold any goodwill towards the Saintress of Salvation. For now, staying in Rhea would be safer for Isabella and Nala. Chris pondered for a long time and finally answered, "Although there are enemies here, relatively speaking, but Negary would also keep them safe of the dragon's blood." The daughter of dragon, Saintress of Salvation, huh? The symbol of understanding appeared on Augustine's forehead as he observed Nala, who was downstairs. "Can I really eat as much as I like?" Nala looked up. Her crystal-clear eyes opened wide and glittered as she asked a female priest. Because there weren't many who had the constitution to accept the grace of salvation. Even a woman could become a knight or priest of divine grace in the Intercam kingdom. "Of course you can. All of these were made for you and your mother. If there isn't enough, I'll make a bit more for you later." The female priest's maternal instincts were touched by Nala's pitiful gaze and gently told her, "Really?" Nala opened her eyes even wider. Perhaps it was an illusion, but the female priest felt like she saw Nala's eyes glow golden for a split second. "Of course." Before the female priest could finish her words, Nala had already cheered and quickly stuffed as much food as she could into her mouth. "It's so delicious, Mama. Have some as well." Nala's mouth was so full that she looked like a squirrel, unable to speak clearly, causing Isabella to shed some tears out of guilt for not being able to fill her daughter's stomach. "She's only a gluttonous little girl," Augustine commented as he lightly pinched his forehead, but exchanged very serious glances with Chris. "Her dragon characteristics have already begun to awaken. The real problem now is how to defeat Negary." With our current force, it would be very hard to do that, Chris told Augustine about everything he had learnt during this period. Negary side control at least 4 bizarre scales. These monsters are incredibly powerful, coupled with an unknown amount of chrome in that spirit shaman young man as well as Negary himself. We will need more people to eliminate Negary. Grosk, you've been doing business here for a long time. Do you know any experts that we can hire who are trustworthy? Augustine turned and asked the merchant. I know 2 people, but I'm not sure if your price is enough for them to accept, Grosk answered after some thought. Those 2 are both experts in different fields, but they have equally weird personalities, and I'm not sure if they're in Rhea right now or not. Take us to meet them. Chris, you stay here and rest. If you keep fighting with that body of yours, you're going to break yourself. Augustine scolded Chris. He knew the sorry state that Chris' body was in because he had used the grace of salvation to heal him as soon as he arrived. With diuresis newbie. Got it, Chris answered without much worry. He knew his own body better than anyone else, and what he feared wasn't death. To him, death might be a form of release instead. Suddenly thinking of something, Chris stood up. In the living room below, while still stuffing herself, Nala suddenly heard someone calling her. As she looked up, she still had a chicken drumstick in her mouth and a piece of steak on her fork together with a mouthful that she hadn't swallowed yet. The blonde little girl turned around and stared blankly at Chris, who was standing at the top of the stairs, apparently still a bit stunned. Nala, Mr. Chris is calling you. Isabella, who sat on one side, felt sorry, but still scolded her. Just look at you. Where are your dining manners? You're being very rude right now. Act more like a lady. I know, Mama. Nala finished the rest of the drumstick in about 2 bites and swallowed. After looking longingly at the steak on her fork, she put it back on the plate, wiped her mouth and hands with a clean cloth. Every step she took towards Chris, she looked back at the food on the table once. Mr. Chris, do you need something? Nala looked wide-eyed at Chris, but still snuck glances back behind herself, obviously still missing her food. Nala, do you want to protect your mother? Chris put one hand on Nala's shoulder and sensed her rhythm. After confirming that she was completely normal, he felt assured and asked, Of course I do. Nala wants to always protect Mama. Nala nodded seriously. Then I have something I want to teach you that can help protect both yourself and your mother better. Make sure to study it seriously, okay? Chris told her with absolute seriousness. Nala's eyes were still a bit confused, just like his past self who didn't have a reason to go adventuring. Nala was still too young right now to understand everything. Perhaps when she did, she would truly grow to become the saintress of salvation in the prophecy. What I'm about to teach you is called respiratory art. Chris pressed his hand on Nala's shoulder and began to breathe in an odd pattern, sending the rhythm into Nala's body through his hand and teaching the pattern to her. Nala's eyes glowed golden for a brief second before it disappeared, but Chris was shocked as Nala's breathing instantly synchronized with his own and completely harmonized with her surroundings.